Hey folks, so a while back I saw two videos that inspired me to make the video you're watching right now. The first was by Fither, who sent out a survey looking for people's top 5 Persona characters, and the second was by Schaffrillas, who did the same thing but for Mario. You can check those out in the description, they're fun watches. As you may have guessed, I thought to myself, well, I want to get in on this and do the same format for Kingdom Hearts, so here we are. Like my predecessors, I asked you to vote for your 5 favorite characters. Not ranked or anything, just a group of 5 that you really like. Getting 5 responses per person instead of 1 is a lot more fun since it gives the less obvious picks some time in the spotlight. If I only let you get 1 pick, we'd probably just talk about the trios in the organization and then call it a day. But no, instead I let you pick 5 and type in whatever you wanted, which was fun for you, long night for me. The survey was only open for a few days, but because I wasn't trying to work on this video for the rest of the month, I closed it once we got a little over 5,000 submissions, which means over 25,000 separate votes. Once I consolidated all of the differently formatted answers, misspellings, and essays that people included to justify their picks, I ended up with just under 600 unique responses. I didn't really give any guidelines for this, I just let people know that they could feel free to vote for characters that don't originate from Kingdom Hearts, so Disney and Square stuff is all fair game. By that same token, I said that if you're particularly fond of any generic enemies, those count as characters too for our purposes today. The only other thing I said was that if you listed 2 or more characters in one response box, I would only count the first thing you listed, but that didn't stop people from trying. Of course, Kingdom Hearts is a series that is especially concerned with making sure one character is actually 4 characters, so that did leave some votes up to my interpretation with regards to how they were categorized. I'll talk more about cases like that when we get there, but generally, most votes for a nobody or their respective completed being were counted toward one combined joint entry, with some obvious exceptions. But if you specified, oh, this character, but just in this one game, or that character, but only in the manga, I'm sorry, but I just counted that toward that one character overall. We're already going to be here forever, I'm not trying to be here for forever and ever. My intent is to show you the vote breakdown, starting from the characters who got 1 vote and working our way to the top. The 2 videos I watched that inspired this project used a music montage to get through the early batch of low vote responses, and I'm tempted to do the same, but ultimately I am unwell, so you're gonna hear every single one of them. There are some pretty surprising answers in these early rounds here, but you can skip ahead to the next section using the chapter feature if you want. Thus ends the preamble, and so begins your tour through the eclectic gallery of 1 vote getters. Alright, let's get into it. Our first 1 vote getter, Absent Silhouette Larxene. Oh, Jesus Christ, is this what we're doing? Okay, cool. The Agrabah Alleyway Lady. Right, so this is an NPC who's only in KH1 Agrabah right after you seal the keyhole and then disappears if you leave the world. Air Pirate, okay, at least this guy is in the journal. Anchor Raider, another piratey heartless. Anti-Blackcoat, not loving the name on this guy, but that's literally what he's called, part of Riku's Dream Drop boss rush. Anti-Riku, speaking of, this non-canon Riku doppelganger in Days mission mode. Anti-Saix, same thing, but with Saix. Ao Oni, he's this creepy little purple guy who I've never heard of. Agrabanian Waka, another one of those limited-time-only Agrabah NPCs. Armor of the Master, the Birth by Sleep final mix boss fight. It's like Lingering Will, but for grandpas. Arroyo, if this is supposed to be a character, it wasn't immediately obvious who, so Arroyo, a steep-sided gully formed by the action of fast-flowing water in an arid or semi-arid region found chiefly in the southwestern US. There, you fucking learned something. Assassin, the Axel Nobody minion. Oral Lion, our first of several Dream Eaters. Aurora, one of 2 Princesses of Heart to get just 1 vote, and you're not gonna believe the other one. Bambi, Dead Mom Robbed King. Bartz from Final Fantasy V, Beat-alike, the beat-themed Dream Eater, Bendy from Bendy and the Ink Machine, no. Big Bully from Mario 64, okay. Billy Butcher from The Boys, alright. Billy Joel, he sang that one song in Oliver and Company, but that's never been referenced in KH at all. Billy Zane, not Ansem, this person only said Billy Zane, who is the real man who once voiced Ansem. The Bizarre Room Table, who appears along with its sidekick, the Trickmaster. Blue Fairy, okay, back on track, that's a real character. Bomb Bell, the Nobody Gummy enemy, a little less on track. Bruiser, oh, that's the unversed equivalent of large bodies, okay. Buck Cluck, that is Chicken Little's dad, and in my Kingdom Hearts, Buck Cluck is dead in a 12-piece Buck Cluck bucket at Nomura Fried Chicken. Buckle Bruiser, another unversed. Buff Riku, I guess half credit for that. The Carpet, who's gotten us out of a lot of tight jams, and this is the thanks he gets. The cat on the KH3 box art to Ventus's right, What do you mean cat on the KH3? Oh, well I'll be go to hell, how about that? Cerberus, 3 heads, just 1 vote. Chef Kairu, the Dream Eater. Chief Puff, the Heartless. Chip, and this person specified this as Chip Potts, not the Chipmunk. The lady who owns the cat for the KH2 lock-on tutorial, more on that later. 2-time Tony Award winner Christian Borle. Clara Cluck, background NPC of Timeless River. Comantus, boss of Riku's Grid Visit. Cozy Glow, who I guess is a pony. Creepworm, the easily squished Heartless from Days. Cyberyog, the terminally online Yagi Ram. Danny Torrance from The Shining, who was not played by Haley Joel Osment, so not sure what that was. Dark Inferno, the initial super boss of KH3, 1 vote. Dark Cubes from San Francisco. Darth Vader, not yet, check back in a few years though. Data Nominee, yes she does count as a separate character from Recoded. Data Roxas, as does he. Demon Tide might be cheating since it's multiple shadows, but I'll let it slide. Dire Plant, a Days Heartless that shows up again in Union Cross. The disembodied text tutorial narrator who teaches us about locking on in the command menu. The Dog in a Bag from Twilight Town, who I technically could have counted as a vote for the Dusk, but I'm not that pedantic of an asshole. Godolphin from KH1 Atlantica, Lord of Progression Barriers. Dopey, one of 2 dwarfs to get a vote. Dr. Finkelstein, and shockingly his daughter Sally did not cop a single vote. Dr. Mog, who is a Union Cross medal. Dream Eaters, just the concept of Dream Eaters, I guess. Dual Blade, another Days Heartless. Ducky Goose, the Dream Eater. Dustin Henderson from Stranger Things. I mean, I would have picked Steve or a Demogorgon at least. Edgar Rice Burroughs, whose estate swallowed the deep jungle. Eeyore, who was going to throw himself into the river again unless just 1 person voted for him, so good job. Egg Cognito, a Union Cross Heartless who does not want you to see its search history. Elsa, dead serious. She was in one of the biggest fucking movies of all time and she got 1 vote. Emerald Serenade, a Days Heartless, same amount of votes as Queen Elsa of Arendelle. Emperor Taiwu of Northern Wei, what the fuck have I gotten myself into? The Evil Queen, who is frankly Wish.com Maleficent, even though she came first. Experiment 221, also known as Sparky. Flora, Fauna, and not Merryweather, she was the most popular because she's not as easily mixed up with the others. Flash, he's the sloth from Zootopia, and he's a Union Cross medal for some reason. Flower Meow, he's Meow Wow, but flowers. Freddy Fazbear, alright, okay. Freya, one of the characters from the allegedly upcoming Missing Link. Friendly Randy, very cute, this is the name I gave to the Prankster's Paradise Clown in a video or 2. Fruits Cat, another Dream Eater. Foo, and spoilers, no Rai, he's the only Final Fantasy character to get 0 votes. The Gargoyle Knight, one of those statue Heartless that the possessors possess. Geppetto, the Gigas Shadow. Gilgamesh from Final Fantasy but appears as a Union Cross medal. Giraffe Star, the only Union Cross pet species to get a vote. The Glacial Fortress from KH3, one of 2 gummy bosses to get a vote. The Gold, is it Tricholoma? The criminally most recent mushroom-style Heartless from Coded and then Union Cross. Gorilla, just one of the random unnamed deep jungle gorillas you have to save. The Grand Duke from Castle of Dreams, and where there's the Grand Duke, there's a ball. The Grandstander Ball from the KH2 minigame. Grape Flan, the one in Arendelle, gets the same amount of votes as Elsa. Grogar, another pony guy. Groundshaker from Pride Lands. Grumpy, the other dwarf to get a vote, so the 2 best ones, that's good. Guard A, based on Razul from Aladdin, and which wasn't even a meme vote. The person who submitted it had like a sentimental reason. It was very nice. Guybrush Threepwood from the Monkey Island series. Ham from Toy Box. Hatsune Miku, shocked there's only one of these. Hiro Hamada, disappointed there's as many as one of these. Holy Moly from Country of the Musketeers. Holy moly, that's not a lot of votes. The Hollow Bastion Second Visit, not a character, but go off, I respect it. Honest John, who is cut content from Days, so you are half correct. Honey Lemon, and I'll just say now the only other big hero human to get any votes. Huge Snowman, a Union Cross Heartless, they were sorta out to lunch on the name for this guy. Huge Watermelon, just got deja vu. The hypothetical cat mentioned by Aqua in 0.2, no vote for the dog in the same quote though. Ice Titan, the least loved KH1 super boss. Ima Gundy, some Star Wars shit. Iron Imprisoner, that Mirage Arena Unversed boss. Irvine from Final Fantasy VIII, nope, not quite. Ivan, the one and only, it's like a gorilla, this one doesn't count. Jacques, one person really wanted to piss me off and they knew just how to do it. Jasmine, how did Snow White score better than Jasmine? We used to be a real nation. Jeff Probst, there is an Exile Island in the Caribbean, but I'm afraid the tribe has spoken, Probst is not canon. Jelly Shade, the unversed fodder. Jim Hawkins from Treasure Planet could have appeared in Dream Drop if there wasn't a rampant case of head and ass syndrome running through the Square Enix offices in 2012. John F. Kennedy, like the 35th president, bit of a head scratcher. Josh M. Gibbs, Jack Sparrow's first mate. Judy Hopps, she's a Union Cross medal. Kaiji Ito from anime, I assume. Kefka, still not a secret boss, but is a Union Cross medal. Kevin Flynn, Sam's daddy from The Grid. KH1's Magic, just the KH1 Magic system, I respect this as well. Kiara, and don't worry, we didn't lose a vote for Kairi here, they specified Simba and Nala's cub. I saw a lot of butchered Kairi spellings. Kingdom Heart, just the one Kingdom Heart please, here's the moon I guess. The Kingdom of Corona birds that you have to bring to Rapunzel. Kinger from the Amazing Digital Circus, whatever that is. Kokichi Oma from Danganronpa, whatever that is. I'm kidding, I know what that is, but how angry did you get? Lady Tremaine, not quite a Wish.com Maleficent, but probably like, you know, like if your local grocery store had a version of Fruity Pebbles, but it's called like Fruit Stones, that's Lady Tremaine. Laguna from Final Fantasy VIII, he was supposed to run the Mirage Arena in Birth by Sleep, but he was double booked. Lance Bass voiced Sephiroth in KH1, but I have to say bye to this vote. But give this guy a weapon and you've got the Lance Soldier, and that counts. LeBron James, Captain Li Shang, Lightning from Final Fantasy XIII, and the voter tried to justify this because Dissidia is seen in Toy Box, but Lightning is just straight up in Union Cross. Lightning McQueen and Mater, thankfully not in Kingdom Hearts, at least not yet. Pinocchio, okay, he's actually in the games. Live action Pinocchio, god damn it, why? Lord Tyrek, another pony. Lucifer, the cat from Cinderella, not the devil, he's later. Jonathan One Piece, Mad Ride, which is the Final Mix Hot Rod variant in the Cavern of Remembrance, March Hare, and spoilers, no Mad Hatter, which is a shame, I always appreciated his fashion sense for some reason. Mario, honestly surprised there was only one Mario vote, I mean, Sora literally shook hands with the guy. Phoenix Wright, I object to this. Miles Edgeworth, I object to this as well. Mog, otherwise known as the funky Moogle kid from Union Cross, known for appropriating Moogle culture and misusing the K-word. Mogtaro, this is specifically the Moogle in Timeless River. Mother Gothel, for how thirsty I've seen people get for her online, this is all she mustered up. Mountain Coaster, the attraction flow. Mrs. Incredible, who is a Union Cross medal, not too surprised that she was the only member of the family to get a vote. Mysterious Sir, who I initially thought was a vote for like a young Xehanort before realizing that it is a Union Cross boss based on Kefka. That's as good as it's gonna get for him. Nagi from The World Ends With You, who could conceivably exist in the KH context, but we don't have any proof of it. Nept, who is a presumed relative of Aqua from Missing Link. Nikolai Ceausescu, he was like a Romanian dictator. Nightwalker, the Land of Dragons Heartless. Mushroom 13, number 11 and 5, just those two for some reason, from different people. Oathkeeper, the Keychain, who last I checked is not a person. Odin, the teacher of Ericus and Xehanort from Dark Road. Olaf, who had a stranglehold on pop culture for like 3 years and got 1 vote. Orbulus Raymond, I hear he's really good at Fushigi. Orcus, otherwise known as the Ogre, the invisible palette swap from Days. Owl, Smug Dick, I'm glad he only got 1 vote. Pajama Sam, my fucking guy, love that guy. The Parasite Cage, 2-time loser of Monsters Belly Brawl, 4 if you want to count Chain of Memories. Peeps to Who, another Dream Eater. Pegaslick, but specifically the rare Nightmare version this time. And his less angry brother, Pegasus from Hercules. Pikachu VMAX, which is like a Pokemon card, I guess. Pinkagaricus, the KH1 Final Mix Mushroom. Pirate, another KH1 Heartless. Pit, I'm assuming this was for Kid Icarus Pit, who, again, Sora can fight in Smash Bros. Prince Philip, one of the blandest bland men, got the same amount of votes as Elsa. Queen Buzzerfly, a Dream Drop dive boss. Queen Chrysalis, another goddamn pony. Korra, the only other resident of the grid to get a vote. Rabbit, who I always thought was kind of like the proto-Squidward. Randall from Monsters Inc., still want that Randall boss fight. Rapid Thruster, and I'm realizing I think someone just submitted all of the Heartless who I said have horny-sounding names. And you don't want to mix horniness with recklessness, but unfortunately the Reckless Heartless was next. Red Nocturne, the first of the Prismatic Melodies. Red 13, who should have been in the Pride Lands, but everyone's a coward, so can't count this sadly. Riku? Oh, from Xenoblade Chronicles 3, that makes sense. Rock Titan, the 1 seed in the Hades Cup, 1 vote, about as much as he deserves. Roy from Fire Emblem, who is, again, at least in Smash Bros, so not the most wrong thing here. Roz from Monsters Inc., another one who conceivably could exist, like I'm sure there's Roz paperwork laying around Monstropolis, but no hard evidence. The Rugrats, well, no, this one's just a hard no. This vote just said Ryan, so I'm saying it's for Ryan from Disney's Extreme Skate Adventure. That's my guy. He's a DJ now. Ryoma Nagari from Getter Robo. Y'all are just typing anything, huh? The Sanctuary FMV, I respect the hustle. Sapphire Elegy, Striped Aria, and Scarlet Tango, some more prismatic melodies from Days. Sasuke, I think he's like Naruto's buddy. Scar, my favorite Disney villain of all time, gets 1 vote, and if it's based on his KH2 showing, I can blame literally nobody. Search Ghost, searching for more than 1 vote, I assume. Shadow Glob, like the pimples from Days and the Oogie's Manor fight. Well, they're heartless. Are they living? I guess this counts. Shigeru Ishiba, the Prime Minister of Japan, who the voter argued exists in Kingdom Hearts because of the KH4 trailer. Play the noise. Shiva, a classic Final Fantasy summon who shares a likeness and a name with a Union Cross Heartless. Shoka from The World Ends With You, same thing I said about the other girl applies here. Shred Ghost, a gnarly Search Ghost variant from Union Cross. Simple and Clean.mp3. Sleepy Snoozer, another Union Cross enemy. Sniper Wild, the Final Mix exclusive monkeys in KH1. Goten, who is Goku's kid, I assume. Sora's dad, who we know exists because he's directly referenced in Birth by Sleep. Sorcerer, which is Xemnas' Mook Nobody. The Sorry My Friends Aren't My Power guy from Union Cross, Antithetical King. The Soul's Lost Waiting for Missing Link, and the number grows with each passing day. Staggerceps, the Dream Eater, Stalwart Blade, A Days Heartless, Stan Lee, who I guess is debatably canon because he's Fred's dad in San Francisco. Strawberry Flan, the toy box one with the teacups. Tails from Sonic. Terra? Oh, Branford. She's a Union Cross medal, so I'll allow it. Terra's Pants, which I'd wear every day if I had them. The Black Box, which maybe there's a character in there, who knows. The Caterpillar, who is only in VCast, and I think you were smoking a bit more than hookah to think of submitting him. The Kraken from KH3 Caribbean. The Mayor from Halloween Town, maybe he was elected with 1 vote too. The X Sigil, which appears in characters' names, but that's about it. Tia Dalma, aka Calypso. Adachi, who won the Fither video, tied for last here, which makes a ton of sense considering how this isn't about Persona characters. Tony Soprano, and I don't even want to look at how long the video already is. Tornado Step, one of the few Heartless to debut in COM. The Trick Ghost, and the devs actually messed up and named 2 separate Heartless species Trick Ghost. I'm assuming this vote is for the KH2 one because the other one's from Union Cross, which like, come on. Tubgwin Ace, the Special Dream Eater. Tweedledum, not D, just dumb. Uncle Kong, Undead Pirate B, based on Jacoby from the movies, Undyne from Undertale, this unused Agrabah NPC who I actually didn't know about prior to this, so at least I learned something. Well, that and Arroyo. I went to college for 4 years. Ursa Circus, another Special Dream Eater. Vala? Who? Oh, okay. Volley? Who? Oh, okay. The Vanitas Remnant, just stand behind the pillar and kill him with Strike Raid. Wallace, or White Barret, he's just some dude in Twilight Town whose name is a reference to Final Fantasy VII Barret. The Wardrobe from Beast Castle, Wargoyle, the Hunchback boss. The Wayward Wardrobe's High Heel from Union Cross, not the actual Wayward Wardrobe, but the little high heel minion guy. Wedge, another shopkeeper named after an Avalanche member. Werewolf, the very plainly named Union Cross enemy. White Crab from KH3 Caribbean. White Rabbit from KH1 Wonderland. The Union Cross enemy called Wibble Wobble, and as far as I'm aware, Wibble Wobble, but it does not fall down. William Howard Taft, the 27th president who did wibble and wobble and fell into a bathtub and got stuck, except that's not true, it's very much not proven, but we all just keep saying it. Wizard, the Heartless from KH1 as the person specified, not any of our other KH wizards. Wreck-It Ralph, the only character from Game Central Station to get any love, and probably only because he's a summon in KH3. Xemnas' Dragon from the end of KH2. Xylophone, I'm not sure if this is like a joke about organization names, but I counted this as a vote for an actual xylophone. Yellow Opera, another one of the OG Prismels. Zolophant, the Elephant Dream Eater who I own cool fan art of, shout out to my patron Ali. And Regular Pat's Sanity after sifting through all of this bullshit. You said it, buddy, not me. Well, this has been pretty brisk and breezy so far, right? Before we move on to the characters who got 2 votes, I want to take a moment to stop and memorialize the characters that weren't given any love whatsoever. I just don't want you to get your hopes up thinking that Kanga's gonna show up at like the 40-minute mark, because she's not. Feminism is set back years for this betrayal. So I just quickly want to remember Cinderella's stepsisters, all of the gods who live on Mount Olympus, the Beagle Boys, the Queen of Hearts soldiers, Lumiere, the Magic Mirror, Prince Charming and Prince, the Rafiki, Sean Yu, Sebastian, Slightly and Cubby, and once again, Wendy, not one of the chosen ones.
What?
Interestingly, the only KH original characters to not get any votes were Heimdall and Helgi from Dark Road and Sigurd from the very end of Union Cross, which, that tracks. Alright, keep those sorry bastards in your prayers tonight. We're gonna move on to the characters who got a whopping 2 votes. Abu, who I kind of have a grudge against ever since Union Cross, or at least what I managed to play of it. Anna, who beat her sister in popularity, but not by much. The Assault Rider, right, that's another one of those horny, heartless names, but at least this one's got a cool design. Berserker, which is Sykes' Mook Nobody, and they're kinda daddies, to be honest. Blocks Bug, someone said they voted for this because Recoded was their first KH game. Thanks for your bravery, and I'm glad you're still with us. Bouncy Wild, pretty shocked it's only got 2 votes, you sickos. Brains Chirithy, and if you said Ven's Chirithy or any other variation, I just lumped it into Chirithy votes, but Brains Chirithy is an exception, because fashion. Buzz Lightyear, this is actually crazy. This is this round's Elsa. I triple checked on this. I think he's tied for the least popular party member in a numbered title. You know who else from Toy Box got 2 votes? The non-living Cactuar blocks. Captain Barbossa, and this lack of respect makes him feel cold. Catastrochorus, the excited golden retriever dinosaur boss from San Francisco. The Cherry Flan, which is the Olympus shield slide one. Chip, and this time it is the Chipmunk. Chiro, which is the aforementioned lock-on tutorial cat. Its canon name is Chiro. Clayton's gun, specifically the gun, not the guy. Cleo, which is Geppetto's fish. Data Sora, but specifically the version from Remind in the data analysis, very cheeky. Dustflyer, the pseudo-super boss from Days. Flounder from Atlantica, and Flynn Rider, who is tied with Buzz for least popular party member in a numbered game. Again, really surprised by that, but I mean, you only get 5 votes for this, so I get it. Alright, I'm just gonna lump a bunch of Mook Heartless together here. The Deserter, which is the Soldier palette swap from Days. The Fortune Teller, Strafer, and Icy Cube from KH2. The Gargoyle and Screwdiver, I hardly know her, from KH1. The Mighty Macaron and the Weapon Master from Union Cross. And the Popcat and Winterhorn from KH3. We've also got another Nobody, the Gambler, and an Unversed, the Hair Raiser, and a handful of Dream Eaters as well, the E-Glider, Escar Glow, Magic Lapon, or however you say rabbit in French, Mimi Bunny, Pricklemane, Thunderwrath, and Pseudo Neku, the Neku Sakuraba wannabe. Captain Gantu, which I thought my Twitch chat voted in this survey, but obviously not since they're incredibly thirsty for him. Glut the Shark, and this is payback for scaring me shitless as a kid. The Infernal Engine, the heartless boss of Beast Castle in Days. Jeff Bridges, the guy who portrayed Kevin Flynn in the movie but did not voice him for Dream Drop. Kala, Kerchak, and Turk, at least they beat the one and only Ivan. Leechgrave from Days, son of a bitch. Lich from KH3, son of a lich. Lightning Angler, one of you just wrote Big Fish and I knew what that meant. Oh, I missed a Heartless. The Loudmouth, also known as the Crescendo, which originated in Chain of Memories. Louis, sadly the least popular of the Duck Nephews, and this one feels like bullying to me. Lumpy, really fucking pissed off about this guy beating Eeyore. Merryweather, again just slightly more liked than her sisters because you're not gonna mix her up. Flora and Fauna should be swapped. When I hear Flora, I think of plants, and plants are green, fuck! Minnie Mouse, which for a while it looked like she wasn't gonna get any votes at all, but 2 people came in clutch. Still, this is pretty sad. The Moai Tissue Dispenser from the Days manga, more of an item than a character, I'd say. Mr. Mew, which is Shiki's doll, who I almost played the Womp Womp noise for, but apparently he can, like, move around and do stuff, or at least in Twooey. Mushrooms. You both just said mushrooms, and I didn't know what that meant, so here's the Destiny Islands mushrooms for the raft. No Heart, the other big armor boss from BBS Final Mix. Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, I also think this would be cool, but he's too busy ruling Wasteland. Pascal, and I wonder how Eugene feels being tied with the little fucker who tongued his ear hole. Can I say that on YouTube? I mean, I just did. Pleasure Dog, no shot either of you actually like this, you just voted for it because it's an actual real Heartless called Pleasure Dog. Pongo, and once again, throwback to the Union Feud video, No Perdita, Sexism. Pumbaa, and that's right, No Timon, I think that's homophobia. Queen of Hearts, and one of you degenerates specified only when her panties are showing in the Crank Tower fight, goddamn you to heck and back. Remus, another Missing Link newcomer, this is like the 4th time Nomura's made Reno. Rex from Toy Box, at least this time he beat Bahamut, who I'm surprised no one voted for the KH1 cut content angle. Sark, fittingly outperformed by the MCP. Schwarzgeist, the other gummy boss to get votes and the de facto highest gummy enemy. Sea salt ice cream, the sticky, sugary glue holding the Days trio together, but unfortunately not sentient. The second mail delivery pigeon that Roxas delivers mail to by grinding on the rail. 2 people said mail delivery pigeon, but 1 person specified which one. Shock and only shock, no lock or barrel, so alright, maybe we're regaining some ground here. Sigrun, an upperclassman from Dark Road, my sources tell me. Snow White, I mean, seriously, Jasmine had a pet tiger. Does the pet tiger add nothing for you guys? Sonic the Hedgehog. 1 person tried to reason that because Sonic is in the Wreck-It Ralph movie and there's a Wreck-It Ralph world in Union Cross, that Sonic is in Kingdom Hearts. The other person just said Sonic with no explanation, and I respect them more. Spectre, not the monkey from Ape Escape, this is the name of Marluxia's big nobody mech in Chain of Memories. Spider-Man, again, not yet, maybe soon though, or I don't know, I don't fully understand how Sony works. Storm Rider, the Land of Dragons boss on the 2nd visit. The Hydra, 7 heads, just 2 votes. The Peddler, thousands and thousands in gold, just 2 votes. The Traverse Town Hotel receptionist, who says paintings are great, yes, 2 people submitted this in their own different words. The Traverse Town large man, who blocks the shortcut and teaches you about capitalism. The Traverse Town prostitute, don't worry, this is not the lady in green near the cafe, she's later. This is the lady of the night who approaches Sora in the KH1 manga. I'm dead serious, she's in jail now. Leon put her in jail. Tweedledee, for whatever reason, got 1 more vote than Tweedledum, so fuck him, I guess. Undead Pirate A, based on Bosun from the movies, and Undead Pirate C got no votes, so fuck him too, I suppose. Vexen Replica number 44 from the manga, a distinct enough character from Vexen for me to count it separately because it opens up a big can of worms if I don't. Will Turner, not to be confused with Lingering William. The World of Chaos, still the most fucked up thing I've ever seen. Yao, the only one of the soldier trio to get any votes, and rightfully so because he's the best one. Both Utada Hikaru and Yoko Shimomura, honestly underrepresented here. Like, no, they're not characters, but only 4 of you thought to list them. They give us Peak and you give them 2 votes. And ironically, our last character to have a vote count of 2 is 0. Alright, we're really cruising now. Here's our 3 votes characters, and let's just start with a lightning round of mooks. We have the Blue Rhapsody and the Black Ballad from KH1, the White Knight and the Rare Truffle, also from KH1, the Rabid or Bad Dog from KH2 and the Parasol Beauty from KH3, the Dream Eaters Lord Kairu and Sir Kairu, and one of you Sir voters specified the Nightmare version, so that's the PNG I used, and the Dinosaur Dream Eaters Skelterwild and Tyrantorex. Anti-Sora, the boss from KH1 Neverland, which I'm sure at least one of you meant Sora in anti-form when you said this, but that's a different thing. Similarly, there's another Neverland Sora, Shadow Sora, which is a limited time enemy that shows up prior to the Anti-Sora fight. This is not to be confused with Sora's Shadow, which is its own character encoded, but again, different thing. The ATST foot from the KH4 trailer, I don't really know if I should play the rejected input noise here, so here's the Vine boom sound. The bathtub from Halloween Town that ferries around the delinquents. I don't know if it's sentient, but I really hope it isn't. The Behemoth, and sadly no one specified the Final Mix Guy Fieri variant. The Chimera, the Halloween Town Final Mix Heartless, really cool design. Cogsworth, who I would 100% expect to be less popular than Lumiere, but maybe people just really hated that stealth segment in Days. The player's credit card used to facilitate purchases in Union Cross, who at least one of you noted is the most powerful party member of all. Daisy Duck, and I'm pretty sure if you get more votes than the Queen, you get to take over. Sorry, Minnie. Dale, who I also personally always liked more than Chip. Dark Baymax and Davy Jones, and with that there are no KH3 Disney bosses left, and that is equal parts sad and expected. Dr. Jumba, the mad scientist from Deep Space, the Enchanted Brooms from Disney Castle, Gaston, who's criminally only in Union Cross, the Grim Reaper Heartless boss from Port Royal, Hermod, a Dark Road party member, and Hoder, Balder's dead sister, Iago, and I would love to hear Gilbert Gottfried bemoan how Iago only got as many votes as the fucking Dark Road PNGs, rest in peace. Ira, the least popular foreteller, which I guess I get, but I'd probably put at least 2 beneath him. I guess that horn isn't doing much for him. Jane Porter, just floating out there in the Edgar Rice void. Jetsam, and for whatever reason, Flotsam got more votes, even though the only difference between them is where their yellow eyes are. Julius, the out-of-nowhere super boss from Dream Drop. The Keyblade, which one of you argued has a personality in KH1, which, good attempt. Maleficent's Goon, and there are a few types, but one of you specified the Archer one, so here's him. Marshmallow, and wow, the KH3 party members are not doing well so far. Marshmallow is also the highest placing Arendelle character, if you could believe it. Meg, singer of one of my favorite Disney songs. The Missing Link protagonist, otherwise known as the Pirate Fella in White or the Admiral. Monstro, the only character who is also a world. Mrs. Potts, again, thought my Twitch audience took this survey, but clearly not because they are incredibly thirsty for her tea, obviously. Mushu, without whom I could probably not complete a level 1 run of KH1, so props for that. Nightmare Chirithy. I know I said I was lumping all the other Chirithy variants besides Brains together, but this one also looks markedly different. Quasimodo, the King of Fools on all days where I'm unavailable. Ruler of the Sky from Days, and surely these are ironic hate votes. I mean, the design is cool. Selfie, and kinda shocked she was the least popular of the Destiny Islands kids since she gets the most screen time by virtue of her KH2 appearance. Censor! Stick, the stick that Roxas uses in Days. Thresholder, the door guy from KH2, only a room away from that stick. Trinity Armor, the unversed guard armor ripoff from Birth by Sleep, and Vidar from Dark Road, to my knowledge the only named black character original to the series, and they stuck him in a mobile game. Okay, onto the 4-vote characters. I kinda like the flow of getting these generic enemies out of the way first. To be honest, I should have done that for round 1, but I didn't think to until I finished recording it. Oops. We have the Angel Star and Dark Ball from KH1, as well as the Green Requiem, the most popular Prismatic Melody Heartless, also has a great YouTube channel about Kingdom Hearts music. The Power Wild from KH1, the most popular of the Monkey Heartless. And the Bulky Vendor, the Gimmick Heartless from KH2 filled with rare drops. The Reaper from KH3, Marluxia's Nobody Flunky, who scored better than the Grim Reaper. And we got some more Dream Eaters, including Meowjesty, the more regal Meow Wow variant, Neko Cat, and Yagi Ram. Angelic Amber, who I'm not sure is sentient when not possessed along with all the other Galaxy toys. Also, I never noticed the little Heartless emblem on her ear until now. Baymax, and again, really surprised he's this low, like 1 vote above Dark Baymax? I mean, Big Hero 6 is the newest movie used for KH3, and I know my demographics are closer to my age, so maybe they didn't really grow up with it, but I don't know, it's Baymax. I thought he transcended generations. Oh, this asshole, the Cheshire Cat. Cinderella, rightfully the highest scoring of the old school princesses. Darkness, the primordial entity from Union Cross, and for those who haven't followed the mobile games, yes, Darkness is like an actual character. They're like a hive mind thing. Elizabeth Swan, and I could have sworn her stellar voice performance in KH3 would have shot her right to the top. Fairy Godmother, another character I expected to do better since she's like part of the gang now. But she's tied with Cinderella for favorite Castle of Dreams character, so there's that. Huey, who I sort of anticipated would be the most popular of the triplets, but I've never watched either DuckTales, so I don't know. I just like Red. Red's my favorite of the 3. The MCP from Space Paranoids, Opposite Armor from Traverse Town. I always personally preferred the opposite of Opposite Armor. Pain, least popular of the Gullwings, but also in one less Final Fantasy game than the others. Piglet, oh dear, he's less popular than Gopher? Platinum Presto, which is my mascot. Technically, he's been modded into KH3, but I can't show favoritism just because he's my son. Pot Centipede, kind of a random KH1 boss pool. He's probably the one I'd most easily forget about, but it's a novel concept, I guess. Rue, gotta respect his hustle, the bounce life is no joke. Titus, I know it's Titus, but I just can't. If we were taking just his Final Fantasy X appearance into consideration, he'd be my personal #1 pick out of everything else on the board today. I am an unapologetic Titus ride or die. Tinkerbell. As a kid, I feel like they used Tinkerbell a ton in just general Disney advertisements and branding, not just Peter Pan stuff, so I guess I expected her to get more love here. And Ver, and no, I didn't lump any votes for Kyrie's grandma together with these. They're not the same for anyone who didn't follow Dark Road. Now for the 5-vote characters, most of which I'd say I expected to be less popular than most characters in the 4 and even 3-vote groups. For example, the Bizarre Archer Heartless from KH3, who I feel like is sort of a random enemy for 5 people to latch onto it, but I suppose it does have a pretty cute design. The Orange Flan, the most popular of the Flans, he's the picture-taking one in
A Fairy Tale Kingdom.
Look at that pose, it's like he knows he won. Skull, so technically this is the actual most popular character from Arendelle, which is either an indictment on the rest of the world or a logical outcome when considering an apocalyptic ghost wolf. He's also the most popular of the new KH3 Heartless bosses, and that tracks. The Doorknob from Wonderland, which obviously another one of these meme votes from people trying to think of something really obscure, but the Doorknob isn't that obscure, so it ended up with this many votes. Gopher, yeah, so someone was trying to cheat for Gopher, and I had to throw out some of his votes. 5 still seems kinda high for him, but those votes weren't like suspiciously clumped together like the ones I deleted. So, he can have this one. The Gummy Ship, arguably the MVP of the series, but sadly not really a character. Especially not when taking into account the one person who voted for specifically a phallic-shaped gummy ship. Mr. Smee, and it's just so funny to me that someone like Elsa or Buzz Lightyear can get fewer votes than a side character like Mr. Smee. But he does have more games under his belt. For the next one, here's just the picture first. What do you think this is? The rock that kills Goofy. I actually can't believe 5 of you thought to do this. And you 5, well, you'll pay for this! Santa Claus. One of you voted for Santa Heartless, which sadly never came to fruition, but I counted it because I appreciate the spirit. Thomas Sheep. I know it's only 5 votes, but surprised this one was popular enough to be this high. I guess it's sort of an early game Dream Eater, so maybe more people just have an affinity for it. Tetsuya Nomura. Pretty surprised he's this low, especially considering there's a non-zero chance that we're gonna see his little head pop out when the Master of Masters takes his hood off. And Yuna, my personal favorite of the Gullwings. I have a bit of a theory as to why our third one did considerably better, we'll get to that. Onto our 6 vote characters, kicking off with this Agrabah man, the last of the one-time only NPCs. He's a palette swap of a Traverse Town NPC, and you already know he's showing up later. Ka from VCast, who's kind of like your tutorial guide for the Swashbuckler's Island level. Claude Frollo, our most popular Hunchback character, though I guess only he and Quasimodo got any votes. Dark Riku, easily our lowest member of either organization, definitely my personal least favorite. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if some of you meant like regular Riku but wearing his darkness pajamas, but I counted these Dark Riku votes toward the KH3 Evil Riku replica. Dewey, our Duck Triplet champion. You'll have to tell me in the comments, is he like especially fun in the new DuckTales or something? Heartless. Again, just the general concept of Heartless? Maybe some of you meant Shadow, or maybe you just really like this branding, I'm not sure. Horace Horsecaller. See, Horace definitely has more fans than this, but if you're a Horace fan, you're a Fruitball fan, so you're not doing nerdy shit like answering surveys, you're hunkered down watching the Bruisers Shoegazers game. Peter Pan. On one hand, he's kind of a dick, but on the other, he taught Sora how to fly. I guess that doesn't buy much goodwill these days. Another flying green guy, the Ryu Dragon Dream Eater. It's actually the most popular generic Dream Eater besides the quote-unquote Big Two, which makes sense, dragons are cool. Sully, again, another really low KH3 party member, and someone who I thought would do better since Monsters Inc. is so beloved. On top of that, I figured he would have had the Yeetus Vanitas moment working for him. The Symphony Master, Terra's boss in Castle of Dreams. A pretty cool unversed design. I think the instrument gimmick sticks in people's minds a bit. This is actually the most popular unversed boss, no love for the Cursed Coach or the Big Jellyfish fucker. The Traverse Town Cafe Lady, there she is. Again, not sure if the sex worker in the manga is supposed to be an adaptation of this character, but in the game she just gives Sora some Traverse Town lore. Also, some of you seem to have a crush on her. And ending this round on another Dark Road character, Erd. There's so much I could say about her, but I'm trying to keep this video short. Now for our characters who got 7 votes of light, and we're gonna start losing some more prominent ones now. Starting with Aced, who has absolutely no business being tied with a foreteller as boring as Gula, but yeah, him too. I just really like Travis Willingham's performance, and I can't remember a single thing about Gula besides he's the leopard one who probably has something to do with Ven or Roxas. The Dark Hide from the very end of the Aqua exclusive secret episode in Birth by Sleep. This guy's got a gnarly design, and it's pretty reminiscent of another Heartless boss. Still, surprised this many people remembered it and liked it enough to vote for it. Data Riku, who is also, like, Jiminy's Journal, I guess? I don't know, it's fucking coded. Love how this guy did better than Dark Riku by 1 vote. The Defender from KH1. Really memorable design on this guy. I love the terrifying dog face juxtaposed with the shrimpy little head of the guy holding the shield. I'd like him a lot more if not for the fucking 0.2% drop rate for the Goofy weapon. And another Hollow Bastion debut, the Wyvern. Again, these Hollow Bastion enemies have such great designs, so this makes sense. Also, this fucker's got abs. Another bulky KH1 Heartless, the Fat Bandit from Agrabah. Its less fiery counterpart is going to do better, but I think this guy just got some residual goodwill for being related to it. So this is Jabib, his full name is Jabib Ricardo Klempis. He's the little light decoration guy near Sid's shop in Traverse Town. It pains me to play the noise, but again, I can't just give special treatment to one of my favorite stream bits. The Phantom, the Neverland super boss in KH1, and probably the final mix color scheme with the highest approval rating. Unironically, one of the scariest things in Kingdom Hearts, especially as a kid. Tarzan, our first non-Donald and Goofy party member, but easy to forget about him since his existence has been written out of the story since 2004. Still, he's not the least popular KH1 party member, that goes to Peter Pan. The Experiment, a really cool Heartless concept, and arguably the Heartless with the most backstory, I guess. Also, you should read the discussion page on the KH Wiki for this guy, because there's a debate over whether or not he's a Heartless that spans across like 3 years. Tigger, who I tend to see as a classically really popular Disney character, like up there with the Mickey Mouseverse squad, so I kind of feel like he underperformed here. He's my aunt's favorite, shout out to Aunt Lisa. Ursula, and to echo the Tigger sentiment, I'm a little surprised that a Renaissance villain like Ursula scored this low. I mean, Frollo and Gaston were Renaissance villains too, but they're stuck in Dream Drop and Union Cross. And Shan Yu is Shan Yu. Point being, I guess someone had to be the lowest of the OG villain council, but it still feels wrong. She's not nearly as fun in Kingdom Hearts as she is in the movie though, so that might be a factor. And Wakka, somehow the most popular of the Destiny Island's Final Fantasy kids. I think if we were looking at their original iterations, he'd be the least popular when stacked up against Titus and Selphie, but maybe people are just big fans of
Hey, what's happening, man?
Just 7 characters who got 8 votes, starting with Aladdin. I think he's ruder than Peter Pan, honestly, always bossing us around. On one hand, I feel kinda surprised he's this low considering he's in so many games, but like even when just confined to the movie, how many people are picking Aladdin as their favorite character? Well, maybe 8, and no shade to them. The Dark Figure, Ansem SOD, and Terra Nord's bodyguard, which I technically probably should have counted this as votes toward Terra, but that just felt wrong to me. And yes, if you said Come Guardian, that went toward this. Flotsam somehow beat Ursula, which feels like some sort of hate crime. I didn't know this until like last year, but flotsam is a word for the wreckage of a ship, and jetsam is cargo that's been thrown overboard. So, if you didn't know, now you know, Kupo. The Hot Rod, a notoriously asshole-ish enemy from KH2, so I guess you guys are just masochists. Although I'm surprised the Crimson Jazz didn't get any votes, they're another KH2 Heartless with a really low approval rating. Mulan, or as some of you voted, Ping, the lowest KH2 party member, which I'm not too surprised by. Land of Dragons in general is kind of a bore to me, and that feeling sort of infects its characters. Not that the Disney characters in Kingdom Hearts are often, if ever, any deeper or more fleshed out than their movie counterparts, but Mulan here just feels like she's kinda there. Sadly, she's also our lowest playable character in the Kingdom Hearts Talisman board game. Pluto, again, feels kinda blasphemous that he got more votes than Minnie, who also has like way more screen time. I mean, in Kingdom Hearts, Pluto just sorta runs through dark corridors and digs up old cards in Recom. He's a good boy, don't get me wrong, but he's barely in the games. And we end this round with Sora's Heartless, which is just an alternate form of Sora in KH1, but a separate entity encoded with its own dark side and anti-Sora forms. Only 5 characters in the 9 votes club, including the Darkling, which are Union cross-wielders who have fallen to darkness, but like, retain the ability to talk a little bit, so that's kinda freaky. Given all of the implications there, I personally think they look a little too goofy, but I don't necessarily hate the design. But you want to talk cool designs? Let's talk about Zaldan's Nobody minions, the Dragoons. These guys are just cool as hell. Like, way too cool to be Zaldan's employees. Mike Wazowski, who I really expected to score lower than Sully. I thought people found Mike kind of annoying, but I always liked him, because I'm kind of annoying. No love at all for Boo, by the way. I thought she'd get at least 1 vote because haha cute kids saying kitty, but nothing. Simba, who you might say was the Elsa of the 90s, so I guess I shouldn't be too surprised he couldn't crack double digits. He's a bit of a sad sack for most of his KH2 showing, so I think I prefer Summon Simba where I don't have to hear about his problems. And the Stealth Sneak, and some of you voted for Clayton's Big Lizard, and god I hope this is what you meant. This is also apparently the most popular reptilian character in the franchise. Just a fact about the data that I had in my notes, and now you also know. Genuinely not sure if it got this many votes because people actually like its design or because of its association with Clayton, but I do think he's cool. Memorable, if only for being a wall for my child self's first playthrough. We've got 7 characters who secured 10 votes. We're finally in the double digits, over 40 minutes in. Starting with Alice, the obvious favorite Wonderland character. Alice is pretty fun. She's definitely the oddball amongst the princesses of heart in KH1, given that she's not a princess and she's like 7 years old, but her no-nonsense attitude in a land full of nonsense is always appreciated. She's frankly a bit underserved in KH1 Wonderland, which is a shame since that's the world's best appearance, but thankfully she gets more time to shine in Calm and Coded. Her kidnapping in 1 sort of kicks off the plot of the long stretch of Disney mid-game, so she's played a memorable role in KH history. the Dalmatian puppy, but no votes for Perdita, who gave birth to 15 of the little bastards. So only 1 or 2 of you voted for just a Dalmatian puppy, most of you specified a number. I'm assuming this was done randomly to be cheeky, but I'll tell you all the same. There were votes for numbers 4, 12, 42, 46, 72, 79, and 2 votes for 99, so I guess that one is technically the most popular. Of that group, number 12 is actually confirmed to be the one named Lucky. He's the one who watches TV. I don't know if that was intentional, but if not, you lucked out and landed on a named one. One of you also voted for multiple puppies with 1 entry, specifically numbers 67, 68, and 69. I was like, oh, that's the one in Halloween Town that got moved from underneath Jack's house to the White Trinity on Moonlight Hill between OG and Final Mix. Plus, number 69 is also canonically a named one, that one's Freckles. Then I realized that there's an astronomical chance that the real reason was just LOL 69 nice. I have spent way too much time here. And what do I mean by that? This entry, this video, or on the planet? Vote now. The dancers. Some of you were horny about it when voting. The dancer is to nobodies as the hot rod is to heartless, so I think its notoriety as a difficult enemy, especially on higher difficulty levels, contributed to its 10 votes here. Nothing worse than playing critical level 1 and getting grabbed by one of these. It's as if they're doing a reaction command on you. Enjoy the cutscene as you get tossed into the game over screen. This character has appeared in at least 10 games, so you could say he snagged 1 vote per appearance. It's Hercules. Yeah, I mean, he's a cool enough guy. I do like how Sora looks up to him. It's one of his stronger Disney friendships outside the core group of characters who muddle. By landing here, Herc also earns the dubious distinction of being the least favorite party member in Coded. How sad. It's cool how we basically get to see his whole arc spread out across KH2, BBS, and KH3. He's there in 1, but it feels more like a Herc who's already done the movie plot, or maybe at the part of the movie where he's still in celebrity mode, getting drink and sandal brand deals. Scrooge McDuck, who I would assume is riding off of DuckTales' popularity more than anything else. I mean, he's got 3 appearances, all fairly minor, though I'd argue they get more prominent as the series went on. I like how Scrooge is worked into the KH universe because he's basically got a different scheme to flex his entrepreneurship in each game. In 2, he's working in the ice cream industry, and obviously in 3, he's got the bistro. We don't really see him do anything specific in Birth by Sleep outside of giving out free Disney Town tickets, a sort of unscroogely thing to do. But we do learn in KH2 that prior to 1, he was working with Mickey on setting up a gummy transit system, so maybe he's beginning preparations for that when the Wayfinders meet him in Radiant Garden. Next is everyone's favorite schoolyard bully, Cypher. For a character that only actually appears in 1 game and in a minor role, he did pretty well for himself here. I mean, he beat the Destiny Islands kids, 2 of which are from a more popular Final Fantasy game. While I'm thinking of it, I got a few comments after the bad quotes video saying that I should have had Cypher's "Isn't This Romantic" battle quote in the bracket. And you guys already forced me to put too much Peak in that bracket. I didn't see the need to add any more. Ending the 10 vote round is the Dark Thorn from Beast Castle, which Pokemon evolves from the Shadow Stalker, so I counted them together. Although only 1 of you explicitly voted for the first form. This is the guy I was referring to when talking about the Dark Hide. He's one of my favorite Heartless designs, and one that feels a lot scarier and more feral than most of what KH2 has to offer. It's also got a mechanically interesting boss fight in both forms, and thus scored highest for me when ranking the KH2 Heartless bosses. Alright, slightly smaller crowd for 11 votes. We've got 6 characters here, starting with another Princess of Heart, and the most popular one from KH1 who isn't Kairi, Belle. In the lineup of Disney princesses, I tend to view Belle as one of the more popular, because her and Ariel sort of represent an era where Disney princesses did more than sleep and clean. I sort of anticipated that her famous Belle Bow attack against Zaldin would have gotten her a few more votes. Well, I said the Stealth Sneak was the most popular KH reptile, unless you count Envy, the snake foreteller. To be honest, I always found her on the same tier as Gula, but I do love that scene with her and Ava on the bridge. Scoring just 1 vote higher than his boss, culinary partner, it's Remy, also known as Little Chef. I love how Remy is worked into KH3, and I wish Twilight Town had just 2 or 3 more things similar to this. Having this one isolated character who doesn't get a whole world to explore is a very KH1 approach, like those puppies, or Pinocchio and Geppetto getting a comparatively much smaller world in Monstro but then integrating into the Traverse Town crew. Bearing the lead here, Remy is a cute little guy and he cooks good food. It makes perfect sense that he's this high. Here's our last Gullwing, Riku. Now, I don't dislike Riku, she's fun, but I think there's no shot that she got 6 more votes than Yuna on her own merit. Given that I have seen some truly egregious misspellings in this survey, I am nearly 100% confident that some of you were trying to vote for, you know, Riku. 1K there, not 2. Your favorite nobody mook is the Roxas minion, the Samurai. Their design isn't one that really sticks out in my mind as something that's like super timeless and memorable, but they do have possibly my favorite reaction command in KH2. And a surprise for me, seeing Trickmaster from KH1 this high up. I feel like a lot of people really dislike this boss, but not to the degree of Trickmaster being like a Mount Rushmore annoying enemy like the Dancers or Hot Rods. I personally never had much trouble with this guy. He was the easiest boss of that first circuit of KH1 Disney Worlds for me. Still punching the air about his palette swap for Final Mix. Only 2 characters with 12 votes, one of which was Jafar, and I have some bad news for the genuine Jafar fans out there. 5 of these votes were specifically for Genie Jafar, and I had to throw a bunch of other Genie Jafar votes out due to cheaters. This is probably because I ranked Genie Jafar last in both my KH1 and 2 boss rankings, so he's a bit of a regular Pat meme. That all being said, Jafar deserved more. He's like Maleficent's lieutenant in KH1, but admittedly falls off really hard after the first game. I also really wish we could have fought him in snake form in a game that isn't Union Cross, which nobody voted for Cobra Jafar, but you could say he's the true most popular Kingdom Hearts reptile. And tied with Jafar is the Twilight Thorn, Darkseid's nobody cousin. It's kind of a shame that we never really got any other non-organization nobody bosses, because the nobodies generally have such cool designs, especially when compared to the post-KH1 Heartless, and the Twilight Thorn is no exception. As the first KH2 boss fight, he really showcases the more cinematic elements added to the game's combat system, mainly by way of the flashy reaction commands. I'm just really morbidly curious as to what exactly you would see if you were to pull down that big zipper. Alright, and with this group, we are right outside the top 100, so these 5 characters sadly just missed out, receiving 13 votes of darkness. Kicking off, or Mermaid kicking off, with Ariel, and it looks like she's finally gotten payback for being snubbed by Alice for Princess of Heart status. Ariel is another character who I feel has an especially close relationship with Sora, and that's definitely aided by the parallels between her and the Destiny trio in KH1. They're also trauma bonded thanks to Finny Fun, and she shows up again as a weird water spirit summon in KH3, so she's a numbered title mainstay. Next is Guard Armor, and more than one of you noted specifically the original design. I don't hate his Final Mix appearance, but I'll respect your wishes. Guard Armor is probably the first encounter in the franchise where you have a decent chance of having to attempt his battle more than once, so it serves as like the first potential wall in the series, albeit a relatively soft wall. But this is another classic Heartless design, and one that sees spiritual successors in things like the Trinity armor in BBS, or more direct iterations as seen in Days and Union Cross. Our lowest Melody of Memory party member is unsurprisingly Komori Bat, who I always personally preferred over his more famous counterpart. Also, I know this applies to a bunch of Dream Eaters, but I love how his name is literally just Bat. So like, in Japan, is my Japanese counterpart talking about how it's funny that this guy is called Komori? Really makes you think. Next up is Rhyme. I'll just say now, it seems like the World Ends With You fanbase really showed up for this survey, at least more than I would have expected given the game's relatively small representation in Kingdom Hearts. I was a bit surprised to see Rhyme as the lowest Pooh character, besides Mr. Mew, but then again, I don't really have a great gauge on who's the most beloved outside of Dream Drop. I suppose she gets the least to do out of the group in Traverse Town, so that might explain it. And finally, struck down just outside the top 100 is Zack. It's pretty easy to forget that Zack Fair is in Kingdom Hearts, given that he's isolated to one world in Birth by Sleep. I'm not as tapped into the FF7 fandom, but I generally understand Zack as a pretty popular character, and just based on that, I would have expected him to do better than maybe one other FF7 character. He's a cool guy though. I haven't played Crisis Core, but I love the Price of Freedom. Okay, we're just about to enter the top 100, but before we do, an intermission where I do my annoying YouTuber thing, because I need to be better with that. If you're enjoying the video, consider giving it a like, and maybe even subscribe. I exclusively do Kingdom Hearts stuff, so I promise I won't fill your homepage with shit that you don't care about. Of course, feel free to wait before committing to a like and a sub. I might really fuck this up in the back half. I also just want to point out, if you really enjoy, I do have a Patreon at patreon.com/regularpat, without which I cannot do this full time. My stuff doesn't come out incredibly quickly, but the Patreon helps me not feel pressured by the YouTube algorithm to feed it slop, and for that I am eternally grateful. Thanks for listening, and/or welcome back after hitting right arrow key a few times. I am now exiting soapbox mode. Alright, welcome to the top 100. Of course, we have a lot of ties we still have to get through, but we are dealing with 100 more characters. These are the 100 most popular Kingdom Hearts characters, kinda sorta, you'll see. We've got 3 characters down here with 14 votes, and we're gonna kick off with one who probably wishes he had more. It's Genie. Yeah, you can probably guarantee that Genie would have done a lot better if he were actually voiced by Robin Williams in just any of the games. I'm not saying that the other two guys did a bad job, but you know, it just doesn't have that emotional connection without Robin there. But he's a fun summon in KH1, and especially 2 with the dry form gimmick, and he's overall just some general comic relief. Tied with him is another potentially ageless immortal being, Chernabog. Obviously there's not much actual character to this guy, like I know that people are voting for Heartless and Nobody species, but this guy is a named character, but he doesn't actually say or do much besides, you know, try to attack you in the 2 worlds where he shows up. The Chernabog fight at like the midpoint of End of the World is such a memorable wham moment. Like, you think you're done with all the Disney stuff after Maleficent, and then the game just has one more surprise for you. Not quite as surprising or memorable when he shows up in Symphony of Sorcery, because you're kind of expecting it to, given that it's the Fantasia world. But it is kind of neat how it's a dive-style boss fight set in an actual world. And this third guy in the 14-vote group is not immortal, but he will live on forever in our hearts, even if his vocal cords didn't. It's Phil. It really is a bummer that Phil doesn't talk at all in KH3, and we know why. It's because the Japanese voice actor died, so they didn't feel like it was respectful to record lines in any of the languages. But it was so fun to see him go from this critical hard-ass in KH1 who was just giving Sora a rough time about the whole hero thing, and then in 2 you're like excited to see him, and you're joking around, and he's still not calling you a hero, but by the end, the constellations finally show that SDG have earned it. And then in 3, it's like, what's up, dude? We're finally heroes, right? Like the gods said we are, and you have nothing to say? Your throat is sore, I guess? I know how in the video where I talked about how funny each game is, I kinda complained about Phil because of the whole miscounting his words thing. But outside of that, he's pretty funny and just a good mentor character. Like, you just want to prove him wrong and show that you actually are hero material. We've got 4 characters with 15 votes, starting with the most popular Disney princess, Rapunzel. Given that she's a party member, I figured it'd be her or Ariel as the favorite princess, but I'm a little surprised Rapunzel won out since she just has the one game to her name. I didn't grow up with Tangled, and I didn't actually watch it until after playing KH3, but Rapunzel's charming, and the sequence of her ping-ponging from excited to depressed is one of the best bits in both the movie and the world adaptation. I also love the optional little tasks you can do with her on the journey to the kingdom, like the splash fight in the pond or bringing her the birds. It feels like her and Sora are actually friends by the end of the visit. And somehow also in this tier is Chicken Little. I had to throw out some more votes from cheaters here because I guess someone just really wanted to meme Chicken Little into placing higher. Like with Gopher, 15 feels high, but those 15 he does have don't look super suspicious on my spreadsheet, so I guess he lands here. I mean, it's certainly possible that 15 people just independently thought it'd be funny to vote for the oddity that is Chicken Little, who's not much more than an advertisement for a then-recent film that nowadays not many people like or remember. But he is an unironically useful KH2 summon, so there might be some genuine appreciation out there. Look, he got more votes than his shitty dad, so that's a win in my books. Speaking of potential meme votes, we've got 2 more in this round, including Kairi's grandma. I mean, she seems like a neat lady, and it's cool that her story in KH1 gets voiced in BBS and is essentially the basis for the Key saga. But counting the opening of Key, she's got 3 scenes across the franchise, so not the most prominent character, but easily the most likely to give you a Werther's original, which is hype. And here we have another relative to a main character with even fewer scenes, and even memeier vote, Sora's mom. What exactly she made for dinner that fateful night remains one of the series' greatest mysteries. Sora's mom is sort of emblematic of one of the core themes of the franchise, which is that friendship is the most important thing, while family is useless dog shit that you should throw away at your earliest convenience. The most recently this woman was even referenced in the series timeline is right before Sora got the Keyblade, and even that was just a vague "our parents" from Riku. Sora doesn't give a fuck, and why should he? Why should he care about the woman who gave birth to him when he has Goofy now? Moving on to our group of 4 characters with 16 votes, we have the Soldier Heartless. I didn't really expect this guy to crack into the top 100, but they are a series staple, appearing in every game where Heartless are the main enemy type. I think the Soldier also represents the ramping up of the Heartless threat as the second common species that you come across. They're not difficult to deal with by any means, but they're a clear escalation from the shadows you've been fighting up until then. And the moment where they raid the hotel is one of the most memorable sequences in KH1, so I can't knock the pick here, plus they've got a fun design. We've got another Heartless here who first appears in Traverse Town, the White Mushroom. Given that these guys show up in almost every KH1 world, it makes sense that they're the most popular of the mushrooms, and they're kind of the face of the friendly gimmick Heartless. And I'm really glad they are friendly, because it'd be awful having to beat the shit out of one of the cutest enemy designs in the game. I mean, you can beat the shit out of them, but only for a few swings before they fuck off, you monster. The White Mushrooms don't want any trouble, they're just here to play a game, just like us. I know it probably got most of its votes thanks to its design, but you've also got to appreciate how it encourages a unique use of magic outside of pure combat, something that really falls off in the series after KH1. Sticking with our Traverse Town theme, we have our next player in the Reaper's game, Shiki. Like Rhyme, she isn't given a whole lot to do besides get rescued by Riku, but it's at least kind of funny to see her half flirt with him before giving up on that immediately. But yeah, I don't really know this girl. I like her stuffed animal though. I hope she's able to kill that Reaper or whatever it is they do in Shibuya. And our last character in this group isn't from Traverse Town, but the exotic world of Pennsylvania. It's... oh, who's this handsome fella? It's me, Regular Pat. I'm flattered, guys, but one fun fact about me is that I'm actually not in Kingdom Hearts. I just make some banger fucking content about it for you to fall asleep to. Some more stats: I'm the highest placing real person, the only person on the list with a Patreon, and within the top 100, if we go by release date, I am the 19th oldest, which that fucking sucks. I will also usher in the final instance of this noise in the video. Next we have 3 characters with 17 votes, starting with our most popular Unversed, the Flood. I definitely expected the Flood to do the best of the Unversed, given that it's the most common type, but I didn't at all anticipate it making it into the top 100. While I always found Dream Eaters a bit gaudy and the mechanics surrounding them kind of annoying, they at least looked visually distinct from the other enemy types. Unversed never really felt distinguishable enough from Heartless for me. Like, they're often pretty similar concepts, sometimes clearly derivative of pre-existing Heartless, just with some sad or angry eyes painted on. I get their lore reason for their existence, but on a design level, their inclusion never felt justified. It just didn't make sense to have Heartless running rampant 10 years before KH1, so instead, here's these not Heartless. In the Flood's case, it's obviously the Unversed take on the Shadow, but it's more angular and not nearly as cute. But I mean, it's meant to represent negative emotions, so I guess that makes sense. Also with 17 votes is our newest character in the top 100, Baldur. Given the performance of all the other new Dark Road characters, I was pretty surprised to see Baldur this high up. Were some of you trying to vote for Xehanort because he's bald? Like, balder than most other people? I would have anticipated someone like Ver doing the best out of the Dark Road students, but I guess Baldur's tragic backstory really resonated with people. I've only done like one watch through of Dark Road, but that sequence of him like bedrotting in his room after his sister dies is one of the game's most memorable and kind of haunting. And he basically ends up being the villain of Dark Road, and the KH original villains tend to do pretty well in exercises like these. Tied with the basic Unversed and the Dark Road character is, and this is a travesty, Jiminy Cricket. He's been with Sora for almost his entire journey. He was the only guy to stick around during that Lich sequence in KH3, and this is how he's repaid? He's the 4th member of the trio, the Silent J in SDG, and you grouped him up with Flood and Baldur? I mean, I didn't vote for him either, so maybe I'm part of the problem, but this just feels wrong. I think Jiminy is fun though, and using him to keep track of everything is really smart. It wouldn't make sense for Sora to write things down, he's too busy and also illiterate, but having a small bug man riding around in his hood at all times remedies that immediately. He's always there no matter what's going on in the story. Like when Donald and Goofy abandoned Sora in KH1, Jiminy stuck around. And I spent hours as a kid poring over the journal contents, especially in KH1. I was just fascinated by all of the descriptions. I do think Jiminy is pretty underutilized. Like, you would think that in a series about light versus dark, good versus evil, that the walking, talking embodiment of a conscience would have something to say more often. His best game is definitely Chain of Memories, but he's taken a huge backseat since then, especially in 2, where he wakes up with SDG and then isn't voiced again for the rest of the game. I wonder if he's with Sora in Quadratum right now. I don't really have any reason to believe he isn't, given his track record. Just 2 characters with 18 votes, including our next member of the true organization, Terranort. Or, as the games call him, Terra-Xehanort, but I'll stick with the fan name for brevity. This guy's a weird one because, well, he's 2 guys. We haven't seen the characters that combine to make him on the list yet, so clearly 2 good things don't make a great thing. The main reason for his existence was to sort of reverse engineer how Ansem and Xemnas come from the same source and yet are also Xehanort. For whatever reason, it's a common misconception that the guy dressed up in apprentice clothes in KH2 is a different character from Terranort, but no, they're the same guy. That one is just more well-behaved, at least on the surface. The only difference is that people called him just Xehanort because that's what he said his name was, so no one really knew about his Terra half until way later. Given that Terranort is Xehanort's mind and abilities combined with Terra's raw physical strength and youth, he's arguably one of the most powerful characters we've seen, but I don't know, I've always felt kind of underwhelmed by him. Not in battle, he's often a difficult opponent, I more so mean just conceptually or personality-wise. He doesn't really feel like that distinct of a character because outside of the few times where the Terra in him breaks through, he's basically just a slightly different Xehanort. Except Master Xehanort is generally pretty unflappable, while Terranort seems a bit unhinged. Like, I think of that scene of him throwing Aqua and Ventus around with the chains. Young Xehanort is also pretty calm and collected for the most part, so if the Terra part of Terranort is almost always restrained, shouldn't Terranort just be young Xehanort in different clothes? Maybe that inner turmoil between Terra and Xehanort manifests as a sort of instability that we see occasionally, which I guess is pretty cool. That all being said, this guy fucked me up when I was a kid trying to beat the final episode in BBS, so big middle finger for that. Tied with Terranort is another fearsome foe, albeit with no bearing on the plot. It's the Invisible Heartless. Yeah, this makes sense. These guys are absolute gnarly bastards and an amazing design to showcase how far you've come. It's sort of like the third entry in the Pure Blood evolution line of Shadow to Darkball to Invisible, getting progressively stronger and more dangerous. They've got the intimidation factor of a dark side with even more mobility than its Pure Blood predecessors, all packed with a fucking sword that has the kanji for hardcore written on it. Like, I wish I spoke Japanese when I was 7, so I knew upon seeing these guys that I was about to get my ass kicked. Not that it took more than like 3 seconds to learn that same lesson the hard way. I'm glad these guys scored well. I think they're just so cool, but also easy to forget about because their most major appearance is KH1, and then they really only popped back up in Days and Union Cross. Their influence definitely lives on though, in stuff like the Dark Inferno or the pseudo-dark side in the KH4 trailer. Alright, at 19 votes we actually have 6 characters, and this is as big as the ties get for the rest of the video. I promise we'll see some standalone entries soon. Kicking off this group is Merlin. I'm a bit surprised someone like Merlin did better than a Jiminy, but I don't hate it. I found Sword in the Stone really boring when I first watched it a few years ago, but Merlin is one of the better parts, him and Madame Mim. Merlin is another numbered title staple along with appearing in BBS, where he mostly just invites the Wayfinders into his house to get a command board and gets age-shamed by Terra. But I'd have to say my favorite appearance by him is in KH1, where he isn't even voiced. That's not to say that Jeff Bennett does a bad job voicing him in the other games, but I just like how Merlin is used as a true magical mentor to Sora in the first game. Sora is basically Merlin's Arthur in this game, as he should be, because a few hours ago he was just a kid playing with sticks in the sand, and now he can launch fireballs or stop time, so someone probably should be supervising that. Having him around giving access to his furniture to beat up, or returning to him throughout the game for rewards for your magic efforts really made it feel like Sora was taking his magic studies seriously. I wish Merlin could have been utilized in a similar capacity in the following games. In 2, he gives you some early spells and the baseball charm, but that's pretty much it, and then in 3, he's relegated to training Lee and Kairi and serving as the bouncer for the 100-Acre Wood. I know it's hard to maintain some sense of learning or power creep in a series like this, like maybe Sora outgrew needing Merlin's help by the time he murdered most of the organization, but I don't know, I just always appreciated those more humble beginnings, and Merlin is kind of representative of that era. Tied with Merlin is his rival? Enemy? Lover? It's everyone's favorite sanitized smoker, Sid. Some Final Fantasy characters are physically aged down, while some have their attitudes adjusted to more accurately match the letter in the bottom left of the box art. I played FF7 long after I first played KH1 and 2, so I didn't really understand how the Sid I grew up with was originally a chain-smoking potty mouth. In Kingdom Hearts, they give him some toothpicks and I assume some happy pills, and he's a bit more mellowed out. He'll still get into the occasional bickering match with a Merlin or Yuffie, but he overall doesn't have too much edge to him, despite being voiced by Chris Edgerly. Well, not in KH1, where he's all text bubbles, but it's kind of fitting that he scored the same as Merlin, because Merlin is to magic as Sid is to all things gummy. It's a great use of the character, given Sid Highwind's and many Sid's familiarity with air and space travel. This whole shtick is pretty much dropped though to an even more dramatic effect than Merlin's magic mentorship, because post-KH1, Sid is sort of just one of several data computer guys in the series. Like, we've already got Pence and Ienzo doing pretty similar stuff, so it ends up feeling a bit redundant. There's probably even less reason for Sora to have like a dedicated gummy guy in post-KH1 games, so this is more easily forgiven. Like, Chip and Dale were already the engineers anyway, so now the gummy stuff is just entirely in their wheelhouse. But I still think it'd be fun to get Sid involved with some form of space travel again, and let him say hell or damn. We can afford like 1 or 2 of those, right? Performance-wise, I think I actually like his Remind appearance the best, as short as it may be. I'm mostly just obsessed with how he thinks Sora spent half the series fighting a group called Battalion something. They don't pay him to know the details, but his heart's in the right place. Alongside Sid is a fellow FF7 party member, Tifa. Yeah, anytime where people have the chance to vote for Tifa for anything, she tends to get a lot of votes, so it's a pretty big indictment on how she's used in Kingdom Hearts that she only managed to get 19 here. Sid makes sense, but Tifa is just insanely popular in not just more insular Final Fantasy circles, but as an all-time video game character. Again, I lacked the FF7 context when playing the early KH games, but Tifa not being in one is, in retrospect, really strange. Apparently, according to the KH2 Ultimania, they wanted to add both Tifa and Sephiroth to KH1 Final Mix, but only had enough time to implement one, and they went with Sephiroth. Which was probably the right move, but still, it's a shame. Because she still only has KH2, and I can't imagine that she'll show up again, since people had to fight and claw their way into the Square Enix offices to get the Radiant Garden crew back in Remind. Tifa in KH2 isn't like annoying or offensive, but she comes off as pretty bland, and she's lucky KH2 Aerith is around to distract us from that. She has nothing to do for her first few scenes until her last scene where she has the coolest thing to do, so it's a tricky balance. At least we got to fight alongside her for one of those ravine battles. I'm glad I finally got around to playing Final Fantasy VII, and especially Remake and Rebirth, because Tifa is such a fun character, but I never would have thought it just going by KH2. Looks like this was a big round for Final Fantasy characters, because tied with Cid and Tifa is the Moogle. I could be biased, in fact I almost certainly am because my first Moogles were from Kingdom Hearts, but their KH design is still my favorite. Nothing else has quite seemed right after these. Just the right amount of fur, no weird features on their faces besides their big bulbous nose, which is more cute than distracting, those two little wings, and that glorious red pom-pom. Speaking of, and I know this extends to their Final Fantasy appearances, I love the lore that they hate having their pom-poms ruffled, and the KH2 Journal theorizes that this is why they run so many of their shops through holograms to curb the chance of pom-pom rufflers. KH1 also has some optional dialogue in Traverse Town from the Moogle in the first district who says Pinocchio keeps trying to touch his pom-pom, the poor guys just can't catch a break. Like the White Mushroom, I know most people probably voted for the Moogle solely based on its design, but I do appreciate how they're like this industrious race who don't really have any motivation beyond profit and have somehow set up shop in far-off distant lands. In KH1, they're only in Traverse Town serving as synthesis facilitators, but I like to think that you don't actually need all the materials required to synthesize certain things, and that the Moogles pocket the higher value gems and crystals as a service fee, and that's what funded their economic ventures in the games that followed. Just ignore how they're already doing that in Birth by Sleep, and we're good to go. Back to a Disney character, also tied in this spot is...
Why, hello, Miss Porter. Have you considered voting for William Cecil Clayton for favorite Kingdom Hearts character?
So, full disclosure, I feel fairly confident that Clayton is getting the regular pat bump here. If this survey were conducted by a channel with double or even triple my sub count and reach, I have a feeling Clayton may not score half as well. And I'm not trying to take all of the credit because he's incredibly fun in his own right, but in my community specifically, we have memed this man to hell and back. This position makes Clayton the easy favorite from Deep Jungle, one of 6 times where a world's primary villain is more popular than its primary hero, and we've still got 3 more cases of that coming up. Like everyone else from his world, Clayton's only in 1 game, but Brian Blessed is just so fun in this role, I'm hanging on his every exaggerated, over-enunciated word. Clayton and his big lizard also served as the first big roadblock for my initial KH1 playthrough, so it was immensely satisfying to take him down. I'll never forget the stellar problem-solving skills that Clayton exhibited in his short time, bringing Gun to a battle against a 14-year-old. Sure, it didn't work, but it was objectively the most logical approach. It's not his fault that literally nothing else works either. Okay, so the last character in this group is also the last one on the list who you might debatably consider not actually in the game, Sho Minamimoto from The World Ends With You. Now, I know a lot of you are like, what the fuck, and point taken, but his name appears as one of the Flick Rush competitors in Dream Drop, so he ostensibly owns a team of Dream Eaters in the Tin Pin Cup, which is also just a general reference to Twiwi. Also, I'm sorry I keep saying Twiwi, but I don't have the lung strength to say that whole fucking title every time. If you couldn't tell from my analyses on the other Twiwi characters so far, I only played the first few hours of the Switch port, so I have no idea what this guy's deal is, especially because we don't actually see him in Dream Drop. I will say I did have to throw out some cheaters, like 1 or 2 people who put him for all 5 options, so there's a decent chance that some of these other votes are also no good, which is cringe. But I think some big Twiwi fans got hold of the survey on Twitter and sort of ran a mini-campaign, which is fine. Listen, if this bothers you, regular Pat was already in the top 100, so the list has been invalid for a few minutes now. In the 20-vote group, we've got 4 characters, starting with Yen Sid, who managed to get just 1 more vote than his fellow blue-robed bearded wizard, Merlin. Conceptually, Yen Sid is really fucking cool. I love how they took a relatively obscure, non-speaking character from, at that point, 65 years ago and made him a fairly major player in Kingdom Hearts. Okay, major might be a stretch, he's not A-list, but surely he's at least B. He's another one of those mission control types of characters, which we have a lot of, but he's easily the one who most has his shit together. To a degree where it's a little frustrating that he takes so long to actively participate in anything, but his inaction for the first 3 appearances make his big Moses moment in KH3 all the more exciting. Because when I tell you I popped off for that. I popped off like 20 times in the Keyblade graveyard, but I was especially excited when I saw who that big light beam was, because I had like 5 different possibilities racing through my mind, and not once did I consider Yen Sid. Outside of that moment, I know they needed someone to explain the setup of KH2 to Sora, but it's giving nap time or bathroom break. Sorry to be zoomer about it, I just wish we could have had this delivered to us by someone who speaks just a little bit quicker. I fear he shat on the exposition toilet and didn't flush. Is that anything? Here we actually have our most popular emblem Heartless boss with Kurt Zisa, and I'm assuming you guys weren't voting for the actual man from Medford, New York. Obligatory, please don't bother Kurt Zisa, he's just trying to live his life, he has a family. This was a really pleasant surprise to see Kurt this high up, definitely not something I expected. Kurt Zisa was always one of my favorite KH1 bosses because of how intricate the strategy can get relative to the rest of the game. It's not so much that his attacks are difficult to deal with, although those whirling blade moves can be a bitch, it's more so that you need to learn and understand the concepts being played with in the battle, and there's no KH2 info bar in the top left to tell you what's going on. Once you figure it out, there's still a handful of different methods you can use to work around the limitations placed on you in each phase. On top of that, his design is really cool. He's like a robot snake bandit? Yeah man, sign me up. Even cooler is the fact that one lucky fan got to have his name in a Kingdom Hearts game without ever having to touch Union Cross. Tied in this spot is another KH1 Heartless boss, Darkseid. And with that, every Heartless boss from OG KH1 has been voted for at least once, so that's pretty cool. I know I come from a biased perspective, but I do think the KH1 Heartless bosses are the most iconic and memorable. I mean, I probably would have voted for something like the Grim Guardianess or the Agrabah Lords over the Pot Centipede, but generally speaking, the KH1 designs are really solid. Burying the lead here, Darkseid is so fucked up, like, he's terrifying. My 6-year-old self was not ready for this, or frankly the whole first 2-ish hours of Kingdom Hearts 1. Darkseid makes such an impression during that initial dive to the heart, and I love how he was basically used to illustrate the concept of almost everyone having some darkness in them, since he forms from Sora's shadow. Sora's literal shadow that he casts on the ground, and not like any of the other 4 fucking meanings of those words. And even though it's pretty easy, the rematch with Darkseid on the storm-tossed island during the Destiny Islands apocalypse is one of my favorite fights in the game just on an atmosphere level. The Nightmare has come to life. He hasn't combed his hair since never, he's got a gaping hole in his chest, and he's pissed. Wouldn't you be? Darkseid hasn't felt as imposing ever since those first 2 fights. He's basically just buying time for Ansem in that end-of-the-world crater battle, and his appearances in the game's sense have all felt more annoying than anything, since that sense of scale isn't quite felt as much as in the first game. But again, I have high hopes for that big motherfucker from the KH4 trailer. He looks like a worthy successor. Last in this group, and I told you he was coming, it's Travis, baby! A lot of you said the guy who takes over the accessory shop, or the guy who gets killed by the soldier, or both, and those all went here. I mean, technically, they're probably separate characters who are either identical twins or just look really similar to each other, but I think we know Travis is a man of mystery. And like Xigbar, he can't be contained to just one mortal vessel. The game actually lampshades how this guy's model gets reused if you talk to him in the accessory shop. He's like, "Oh, what's that? You've seen me somewhere before? I have no idea what you're talking about." For the record, his name isn't canonically Travis, but that's what Mike and Jason from the Ansem Report podcast call him, and I think it's a great fit. Did you know? Travis's grandma lives with her pet cat Chiro in Twilight Town, and her name is Twyla. Alright, we've finally arrived at our first standalone character, the only one to receive 21 votes, and it's another Final Fantasy character. Grab your wine and Xanax. In 74th place, it's Aerith. It doesn't matter. This is great. She got 21 votes. It makes sense that Aerith scored right around Tifa because they're both really popular outside of Kingdom Hearts and pretty whatever in it. But Aerith has the advantage of 3 more appearances over Tifa, so it seems like she's just beaten you all down with her persistence. All my thoughts on my feelings toward Tifa pre and post playing FF7 can basically be copied over for Aerith, maybe even more so. Because while Tifa was kinda just there in KH2, Aerith was actively a weird gremlin in 2 games, unvoiced in Chain of Memories, and barely in Remind. The best Aerith showings are those latter 2, where she finally doesn't sound half asleep in Remind, and is like weirdly prescient regarding the nature of Castle Oblivion in Calm. That ages even better after playing Remake and Rebirth, actually. But those 1 and 2 appearances, I found myself looking at my watch going, gee, is it Sephiroth o'clock yet? Oh what, it's been 27 years. Again, I found Aerith exceedingly charming in the new FF7 games, so even if she only earned those votes on the back of those games and the OG, it's nice to see that she at least made top 75. In 73rd place with 22 votes, I promise this is the last meme character, it's the Struggle Tournament sponsor. My Twitch chat and I call him Kenneth. He just looks like a Kenneth. Sorry to all the Kenneths out there. Yeah, so there's no shot this guy makes it to the top 100 if my most recent video didn't feature him heavily. I know this because many of you voted for the guy who's going to enjoy every second of your struggling or something similar. It's a shame he has to say that one creepy thing because he's probably actually a sweet man who loves sports. But yeah, no, I think there's a darkness in Kenneth. We should probably keep an eye on that one. No one got 23 votes, which means we move on to 72nd place with 24 votes, and that's Beat. As I've said in past videos, as someone who's played very little of The World Ends With You, Beat is my favorite based on his Dream Drop outing. He is cosmically stupid. He makes DDD Sora look like PhD Sora. I find his placement here fitting because he definitely gets more content than the girls, but not as much as the other two guys, even though I'm infinitely more entertained by him. He's some solid comic relief and the funniest character in the whole game, as I decided in that Funniest KH Games video. Again, I don't actually know that much about him, but I can glean that he's got a more sensitive and protective side given his relationship with Rhyme, so I'm sure he's also likable in his origin game. Also, remember when he sends some Kuma pandas to attack Riku, but they're spirits, and Riku kills them? Like, he just kills some kids? That's pretty funny. Got some more ties for a bit here. 3 characters got 25 votes, including Captain Jack Sparrow. I have to say, given how some other party members performed, I'm a little surprised to see the captain this high up, but I know people are just generally fans of the movies, so maybe that helped here. I would definitely anticipate Jack doing a lot worse if we took this survey in like 2018, but even still, it's not like he was given a whole lot to do in KH3 that wasn't ripped right from the movie. Most of the new stuff he does get is actually Crab Jack, who I'm shocked no one voted for in a misguided attempt at being funny. Unsurprisingly, Jack is our most popular character from Port Royal and or the Caribbean, though I wouldn't say he had the stiffest competition. Undead Pirate A got as many votes as Barbossa and Will Turner. Jack is at least another party member who has a more pronounced relationship with Sora. It's fun to see Sora's general admiration for pirates be directed towards someone who's generally kind of a scumbag. And their banter about the Keyblade at the end of the second visit in KH2 is pretty charming. It's kind of a shame that it didn't even get referenced in KH3. I wish we had the KH3 voice performance combined with the KH2 content that Jack got. I think that would have been an overall stronger outing than what we did get. Tied with Jack is another pirate, our most popular character from Neverland, Captain Hook. No votes for the crocodile, by the way. I thought given a certain old video on the channel, he might have gotten at least one. While Hook's potentially the least intimidating of that OG villain squad, I always found him to be one of the most entertaining, probably tied with Oogie Boogie. He almost always steals every scene he's in, and like Clayton, I just love how he talks and exaggerates, both his words and movements. He's super animated. The physical comedy even extends to his boss fights, which have him doing shit like running around with his pants on fire or defying gravity like a Looney Tune. Beyond that, I don't have a ton else to say on Hook. I could totally understand someone having 4 original characters on their list and then not really having any strong feelings for a 5th and thinking, hey, Captain Hook's pretty fun, and putting him in the last slot. Swinging back over to Final Fantasy, our 3rd character with 25 votes is Vivi. Definitely a little surprised he managed to beat most of the FF7 cast just based on their name recognition and reputation from their original game, but a handful of you noted that you were explicitly voting for Vivi thanks to his design or a general affinity for the Black Mage. And that makes a bit more sense. Vivi's look is iconic and is one of the first things you might think of when hearing the words Final Fantasy, especially the older school games. I know I really ought to, but I haven't played Final Fantasy IX, so I don't know how well he was adapted for KH2. But I think his role is pretty cute. It's like the little brother who wants to hang out with his big brother and his friends, so they give him an unplugged controller, which makes it all the funnier when Vivi kicks Cypher's ass in the Struggle Tournament, which Kenneth loved every second of, by the way. Another 4 characters are tied with 26 votes, beginning with our first of the original characters introduced in Birth by Sleep, Master Ericus. Yeah, I'm sure we all could have anticipated he'd be the least popular of the BBS gang, but I think I underestimated just how unpopular he is. I mean, 26 votes isn't nothing, but for a fairly major character, this seems pretty low. His design and voice performance are cool, it's just all the things he says and does that are kind of a bummer. I should also say 8 votes were specifically for young Ericus from Dark Road, but I lumped them into one Ericus entry. If I didn't, old Ericus would have 18 votes tied with Terranor and Invisible. I do think Dark Road adds at least something to Ericus' character, even though like 90% of it is that he's a coward who's often running late. Even then, he still held his extremist views regarding light and darkness, and that basically took over his entire personality in his old age, so much so that he was really willing to kill his kids over it. But, nobody's perfect, I guess? He said he's sorry, at least. I think I said the meme votes were done, but it looks like we have 26 votes for Data Sora? Okay, I'm mostly kidding, even though I'm sure some of you voted for him as a joke. Like the other data folk I discussed, and you can spell discussed either way or both, Data Sora is his own separate character with a distinct identity and personality traits. Said identity and traits include dumb. I know at least one of you picked Data Sora because Recoded was your first Kingdom Hearts game, so that's all fine and good, but how about you other 25? What's the deal here? I just think the data people are so funny because Kingdom Hearts loves to go on and on about how all these different things really do have hearts and that they actually matter, but I think the series is kind of talking out both sides of its mouth when it comes to the data folk. Because you can say all these niceties all you want, but if it were true, I feel like the actual characters in-universe would give a shit about any of them beyond the events of Coded. These fuckers are never coming back. The best they're gonna get is that reference from Donald and Goofy in KH3 Twilight Town. I will eat some sort of head adornment if we ever see the Data version of any character from Coded again. Like, what is Data Sora doing right now, and does anyone in the story care? He is 100% a blue pill taking motherfucker. He probably knows his whole existence is a lie, but he's like, wow, that's wild! Anyway! Sorry, I didn't mean to bully, except I think I did, at least a little bit. Alright, back to actual character and substance here, we have the Dusk. Unsurprisingly, the highest ranked nobody, despite being one of the lowest ranked in universe. These guys are such slippery little weirdos, truly disturbing energy radiating from the Dusk. Like, why do they get those lines of unvoiced dialogue in KH2 and 3? You know they brought it back in 3 because it scared a generation of children in 2. Like, we know nobodies are generally more intelligent than Heartless, but how intelligent? In Days, the Dusks are said to make reports after doing reconnaissance, and it's like, do they have extended conversations? Can they write things down? At the same time, the threat of being turned into a Dusk is held over the heads of any potential fuck-ups in the organization. So there's just a lot of fascinating, upsetting stuff happening surrounding the Dusk, which feels noteworthy considering it's just your basic enemy type. I also can't overstate how weird and unsettling their design is by Kingdom Hearts standards. Why is it so jacked and yet so skinny? Why does it have the blue blood circuitry running alongside its limbs? And again, with the zipper, there's a second mouth under that. Do they zip it and unzip it at will? I'm so stressed out. And when the Dusk is around, that means they might steal... Oh no! They're gone! Are gone! In this case, you can fill the blank with votes for Pence, because this is where he landed. Yeah, I felt fairly confident that Pence would be the least popular of HPO, because he's just kind of a dork. Which you would think that would do well with us, but sometimes we look into the mirror and don't like what we see. I have a bit of a grudge against Pence for forcing Roxas and Axel to take part in a quiz show when they were looking for a missing person in Days, but outside of that, Pence is fine. He's Pence. He likes computers and dislikes being dragged along for shopping trips, even though he should feel so lucky that Olette would even breathe in his presence. I'm guessing he's also a big fan of the Bouncer, given his shirts. I think the point of HPO in general is to just be relatively normal kids, so there's a starker contrast between what's going on in Roxas's true life and his fake one. But now the series has continued on past that, and HPO are still around, just generally being normal and trying to help out in whatever ways they can. I probably like them more as a group than any of them individually. And back to a solo entry, in 64th place with 28 votes is another member of HPO, Hayner. Okay, I know I said I liked them more as a group, but if I had to pick one, I think I'd have to go with Hayner. I probably would have said Olette pre-KH3, but his attempted assassination of Ansem SOD with the Hey Loser kick is etched into my mind forever. It's the biggest example of you really thought you were doing something there in all of Kingdom Hearts. But you gotta respect the gumption. I haven't really watched a ton of anime, but Hayner gives off, like, friendly rival to the protagonist sort of energy. Like, I'm sure if he and Roxas could shoot lasers from their hands, they would fly up into the sky and do that to each other because they're mad about something stupid, but then they would get ramen later and probably have band-aids on their noses afterwards. I feel like that's a thing. I guess their struggle match in KH2 is like the lower key version of that. I also enjoy how Hayner is like the guy in the group who's so fucking bored and wishes that literally anything interesting could happen. I can kind of relate to that. In 63rd place with 29 votes is our lowest placing member of the original organization. Can you guess who it is? Of course you can, it's Lexaeus, obviously. As I said at the start of the video, I also lumped in any votes cast for an organization member's human counterpart. 4 people voted for specifically just Alias, not even Lexaeus/Alias, just Alias, so... I mean, at least it helped him beat Pence and Hayner, I guess. If strong silent types are your thing, then Lexaeus is your guy. Or if you identify as an earthbender from Avatar. Or if you're a fan of backhanding children. That's about all I got. We've got another tie at 31 votes, 3 characters in this group, fittingly starting with Zaldin, because him and Lexaeus are 2 generally untalkative peas in a pod. For most of the survey, these two were right alongside each other, and I was kinda sad when Zoldan pulled away just slightly. Which he should've. Even though I always knew these guys would be the bottom two organization members, I'd wager to say Zoldan deserves an even slightly bigger gap between himself and Lexaeus. I think he's got the cooler design and boss battle, and at least his obsession with the beast and all things love gives us something to chew on. I direct you to my video on my Kingdom Hearts opinions that have changed over time if you want to hear more of my thoughts on Zoldan, because I don't think he's as boring as I once chalked him up to be. Still, I wonder what hurt Zoldan more, the fact that he's a member of the organization but couldn't crack the top 50, or that fucking Belbo he took to the gut. Next up we have another pureblood Heartless, the Neo Shadow. Yeah, I mean, ever since these guys showed up in the KH1 secret ending, they've been a staple. They're cool, they're the regular Shadow, but make it new. Take the iconic look of the old Shadow and strip it of its cuteness, and you have the Neo Shadow. I remember watching that secret ending and thinking it looked like a trailer for a movie. It seemed so unlike the entire game that preceded it. I do wish the Neo Shadows were actually as badass in-game as they are in the FMV, because outside of their final mix appearance in 1, they're mostly just fodder like all the other Heartless. But at least they look cool while you slice through them. And last in this group is another member of the Hollow Bastion Restoration Committee, it's Yuffie. I know she's only separated from the other FF7 women by a few votes, but it does make sense why she did the best, even though she's easily the least popular of the 3 outside Kingdom Hearts. I was shocked when I first played FF7 that she wasn't even a mandatory party member. But put simply, she's fun in Kingdom Hearts, and she serves as a good counterweight against Leon's more serious attitude and Aerith's narcolepsy. She's right around Sora's age in Kingdom Hearts, so I feel like in those initial Traverse Town scenes, she's the most easily trusted and endeared to. Leon is a grizzled 25, and don't get me started on Sid. For whatever reason, they felt the need to age him up too, so he's actually supposed to be 42 in KH1. So Yuffie's got that youthful exuberance to her, but still has a handle on all the plot and lore stuff that Sora needs to learn. I feel like they did Yuffie justice in Kingdom Hearts, especially 2 and Remind, because when I played FF7 Rebirth and the remake DLC, I didn't feel like I was meeting an entirely new character. It was more like the Yuffie I already knew, just dialed up a bit. And to think, she only got this KH gig because her name wasn't Riku, with 2 Ks as a reminder. So if you were surprised that the Moogle only got 19 votes, that was a good impulse, because in 59th place with 32 votes we have the Moogle again, but specifically the one wearing the organization coat. I know I've lumped together votes for a lot of other characters, but so many of you specifically voted for the organization Moogle, I thought it was fair to make it its own entry. If we do add up the votes for just plain Moogles plus the 1 vote for Mogtaro, that would push the combined Moogle entry up to 48th place. Once again, even though I'm sure most, if not all of you, voted for the organization Moogle because of the sheer cuteness factor of a Moogle wearing the coat, I do think this Moogle is arguably the one with the most personality to it. Like when he introduces himself to Roxas, he says that his name is of no importance, which is just a direct reference to what Xemnas says. Did the Moogle overhear it? Is he a Xemnas fan, or did Xemnas get it from him? Is it from a book they've both read? On top of that, while Moogles are generally self-serving and don't really care what's happening in the political sphere of Kingdom Hearts, this Moogle abandons the castle that never was alongside Roxas. Which, sure, it might be because Roxas is the only one buying anything, but maybe a sliver of him has some empathy for the guy. Jumping up a few votes, we have 2 characters who received 36, including Stitch. So Stitch was one of my absolute favorite Disney characters growing up. The movie came out the same year KH1 did, so I was in the perfect spot for it. I was a little boy, and Stitch was this hyperactive agent of chaos, aka a little boy, except a blue alien. We were kindred spirits. I loved the marketing gimmick they used, where Stitch showed up in iconic scenes from older Disney movies to fuck them up. So I was so excited when I saw him scurrying around the walls and ceilings in KH2 Hollow Bastion. Stitch is actually a great example of what I was talking about earlier with Remy. Sometimes there are these great opportunities to have one-off characters from a Disney movie show up in an original world, and Stitch is another one of those. He's just plopped in the middle of all the Heartless and Nobody turmoil, and he's like, well, this seems like a great excuse to shoot some guys. He's also got one of the most memorable relationships with the Wayfinder trio in Birth by Sleep, and I love how they retroactively show how Stitch ended up in Hollow Bastion. Question is, was he floating through space for 10 years, or was he crawling around there back during KH1 as well? Coming back to add this line later, apparently, according to the KH3 Ultimania, he's confirmed to have crash-landed on an island and to have met Lilo in the KH canon. Which, I like Lilo, and I wish we could have seen her in the games, but I also prefer the idea that Stitch went from deep space straight to Hollow Bastion. How or why did he leave Hawaii between BBS and KH2? Well, whatever, that's a bummer. Tied with Stitch is another Disney creature, or I guess several hundred depending on how you look at it, it's Oogie Boogie. Oogie is a pretty beloved Disney villain, so he definitely got a lot of votes just due to that, but I think since this survey went out in October, combined with the unfortunate recent passing of Ken Page, Oogie was probably more top of mind for people. It's easy to forget how little Oogie Boogie is actually in The Nightmare Before Christmas. He's really only there toward the end. In any other Disney movie, he'd be a secondary side villain like Kaa or Tamatoa, but his few minutes were enough to catapult him into the iconic villain lineup. And given his limited screen time in the movie, I'd almost say he's better in Kingdom Hearts, but he doesn't get to sing his song or do his stuff in any of the games, sadly. But like I said earlier, he's up there with Captain Hook for my favorite Disney villain in the games. He's always saying or doing something amusing, even if he's not trying. Just the way he talks is so entertaining. Calling Hook ugly in KH1, full body tackling Sally in Calm, and giving Maleficent the middle finger in KH2 if he had any fingers. It's weird because he's from the same world as the KH Santa Claus, but I'd describe Oogie Boogie as the jollier of the two because he's just having a blast, and I love seeing him whenever he shows up. In 56th place, with 37 votes, we have the only new KH3 party member left on the board. There's a snake in my boot, it's Woody. Obviously, this makes Woody the most popular of the new KH3 party members, a demographic that overall didn't do very well in this survey. I'm shocked there was such a gap between Woody and Buzz because I always figured they were roughly equal in popularity. I know as a kid I always preferred Buzz, I even had an actual Buzz Lightyear with a button to extend the wings and everything. But Woody was always the emotional core of the Toy Story movies and the true main character, so I guess that's why he's so far ahead here. Plus, Buzz is kind of a dick for most of the visit to Toy Box. He doesn't really warm up to SDG until the very end, so maybe that didn't help him here. Woody also delivered a verbal smackdown to young Xehanort, a moment that permeated outside the KH fandom. Like, there are people using the Let Him Cook reaction image who have no idea who Sora is. So it's possible he got a bump for that scene alone, although again, Sully didn't seem to benefit a ton from Nidus Vanitas. But yeah, I'm happy to see Woody score this well. He's a cool guy. He knows things about hearts and love. What more could you ask for? In 55th place, with 39 votes, we've got another Twiwi character, Joshua. So again, as someone who played very little of his origin game, I'm surprised to learn that we like this guy. Like, no judgment from me, I'm just going off of what I got from him in Dream Drop, which wasn't all that much. He's kind of giving, actually Frankenstein was the man, he created Frankenstein's monster? I guess it's earned though, because he's the only person in Dream Drop Traverse Town who fully understands what's going on. It sounds like he understands even more than fully, since he's kind of omniscient, apparently. I'll give him this though, we have pretty much the same fashion sense, which is not really a compliment, but I feel slightly more endeared to him for it. Since I didn't really plan on going back to finish The World Ends With You, I went and read the origin section of Joshua's KH Wiki page, and holy shit dude, Jesus Christ Joshua, I think I get it now. Moving on. Once again, jumping up a couple of votes, in 54th place, and I'm surprised he did even this well, it's Ansem the Wise, aka Diz. Some of you explicitly voted for Diz. Which, fair, his design is really cool. It's just a shame about the whole white guy changing his skin color thing. Like, why are you doing that, Ansem?
I can't believe I can't dress up as Diz for Halloween anymore. Because of woke.
Yeah, so Ansem is the closest thing Kingdom Hearts has to a card-carrying racist, well, besides Frollo. But he does go through a pretty genuine redemption arc, and I think the fandom overall might still be a bit too harsh on him. Like, he was a really bad guy, so I understand not coming around immediately, but like, he did apologize and die and go to hell about it, so I don't know how much more we need or should expect from the guy. In general, I think still having a hate-in for Ansem is a bit antithetical to what Kingdom Hearts is all about. Like, there's a pretty consistent thread of empathy and forgiveness, but we're a bit colder on Ansem, probably because he's a guy in his 60s. If you're a naive teenager or a hot 20-something, it's easier to handwave the betrayals of friendship or all the, I don't know, murdering of your coworkers in Castle Oblivion, not naming names. If we're still gonna hate Ansem for something, it should probably be for fashioning himself a title like Ansem the Wise, when he was kind of a dumbass for a good while there. Like, maybe your redemption can be 100% complete if you resign from the position of the Wise. Just a bit more humility would be great. But yeah, I kind of expected the placements for Ansem and Ericus to be swapped because they're both these flawed zaddy characters, and also because I asked around and Ericus is definitely the hotter of the two, and I'd have to agree. But Ansem's been around longer and overall has the more interesting arc, even if he lacks an entire mobile game exploring his younger self. Also, Christopher Lee voicing him for the early appearances definitely helps. Next up, with 45 votes, we've got two characters, including the groundskeeper of the Broken Controller Cemetery, the Lingering Will. Again, some might argue that these votes should have gone toward Terra, but I think there's justification in the game treating the two as fairly distinct and separate. Because, like, it's not Terra, it's just his thoughts inside a cool suit of armor. That's a different guy by Kingdom Hearts standards, and maybe even real-life standards if science can ever figure out how to make Lingering Wills. Regardless, even if I added the votes for Lingering Will and Come Guardian to Terra, it wouldn't change his placement, so no harm, no foul. Anyway, yeah, I get Lingering Will scoring this high because it's not just visually cool, it's conceptually badass to a nearly absurd level. It's been said a million times, but he's literally too angry to die. He's kind of like those final world stars in KH3 before that concept fully materialized. They're tied to the world due to unfinished business or extremely strong connections to something, and that's Lingering Will to a T. For a long time, Lingering Will was the face of the combat side of Kingdom Hearts, and for some he probably still is. Even though I definitely enjoy fighting some super bosses that come after him more, I still have to say Lingering Will is conceptually the most exciting and intriguing of the super bosses in the main entries. That block of time between KH2 and Birth by Sleep was an extremely fun time for speculation about the future of the series, and the Lingering Will was partly representative of that. Especially because there was always a sense of mystique around him for me, because I didn't actually fight him until 2014. In the real time, I just watched grainy videos about him on YouTube. And tied with Lingering Will is another extremely intimidating presence, the large body. This is the ideal Heartless body. You may not like it, but this is what peak performance looks like. This makes the large body our most popular emblem Heartless, and I guess I'm a bit surprised by its success here, although I feel like there was something of a mini campaign in the comments of places where I posted the survey to bump up the large body's numbers. I think I probably would have predicted the Soldier being just a bit more popular given how it's occasionally woven into story moments and how it appears slightly earlier in KH1. But the large body is another iconic design and series mainstay, and it also spawned a ton of variations in Days and Union Cross, or inspired designs for Unversed like the Bruisers. It's also one of the first normal enemies that requires some bits of strategy from the player, since you can't just run in and attack it all willy-nilly. It's a simple design and concept, but a memorable one. Also, I tend to be more forgiving than most on the Final Mix palette swaps, but the large body is straight up ugly in Final Mix. Both it and the Soldier are way better in the OG. And just missing the top 50 with 46 votes, we have another party member. Can you guess who? Well, I'm already playing music from his world over a PNG of his bedroom, so yeah, it's Beast. I'm a better writer than editor. I was never a big Beauty and the Beast guy, like what a surprise. I was a bigger fan of when Stitch came in and fucked up the ballroom scene, but I love Beast in Kingdom Hearts, specifically 1, Shocker. Because you already know from my thoughts on some previous characters, I love when they actually infuse Disney stuff into the original worlds and plot, and that's Beast. Like, Hollow Bastion isn't his world, and Maleficent isn't his villain, and that's great because that's the core premise of Kingdom Hearts playing out right in front of us. I think whether players realize it consciously or not, they feel endeared to Beast and have a connection to him because he was the only one there for Sora at his lowest moment. Well, him and Jiminy, but you guys said he's as good as Baldur. But as short as the segment was, this guy was protecting me from Dark Balls and Defenders while I was stuck with the wooden sword, or when he wasn't doing that, he was always walking into the same corner during the Waterway button puzzle. In KH2, he's a bit more of a dick because they had to use Zaldin to reason why Beast had basically regressed to his movie self and thus had a rockier relationship with Belle than in the first game. It's admittedly a bit underwhelming going from fighting your way up Hollow Bastion to trying to get Beast to come out of his room like a moody teenager, but seeing how Zaldin is able to drive a wedge between him and Belle is at least kinda cool. Again, he gets to be involved in some larger scope KH stuff instead of his world being entirely insular and rehashing the movie plot. Also, I know this goes against, like, his entire goal and happiness or whatever, but I really wish he stayed a Beast. I don't like Prince Adam. Alright folks, we have finally arrived at the Hall of Fame, the top 50 most popular Kingdom Hearts characters. We've got mostly standalone entries from here on out, just 5 more ties, and they're always between 2 characters. So it's not quite a definitive, fully ordered top 50, but a lot of these characters were neck and neck for the entirety of the survey. And coming in at 48 votes, we're kicking off the top 50 with someone who I've just got so much to say about. It's Skuld. So our next character in 49th place with a total of... No, alright. So I did watch Union Cross, I swear. Skuld was in it. She was doing stuff. The personality section on her KH wiki page ain't exactly a novel. I've always kind of teased Union Cross fans for being so attached to quote-unquote their favorite PNGs, and Skuld was always the example I used for that. Because, like, her design is cool, I just couldn't tell you literally a single other thing about her besides that. Like, I think if you took someone like an Aqua and plopped her into Skuld's role, nothing would seem out of the ordinary. But if she ends up being this mysterious Subject X, maybe I'll have more to say about her. I've always said that I found the overall plot and premise of Union Cross way more interesting than any of its individual characters, and sitting here at my computer trying to say anything at all about Skuld reinforces those feelings. Okay, really moving on now to our 49th placer. With 50 votes, it's Tron. I've mentioned on the channel for years now how I didn't really care for Space Paranoids when I first played KH2 and how it eventually grew on me. But I've never had any beef with Tron the character, he's always been a legend. A few weeks ago, I was actually chatting with some of my patrons about Disney characters who are overall more fleshed out in Kingdom Hearts than in their movie appearance. I referenced earlier when talking about Mulan that I don't think that happens very often. But we were able to pretty much reach consensus on Tron being an improvement over his original version. Call him Tron 2.0 if you want. Granted, it's mostly because he's not much more than a blank slate in the movie, but we take those. Cause, you know, he's got a little arc in KH2. It's your pretty standard robotic guy learning how to be human and have fun, but that doesn't stop it from being cute. And he's another Disney party member who I feel has a more substantial and memorable relationship with Sora, if only because they're on a hugging basis. Also, and I've said this before, the sequence in which Tron calls the MCP ugly, tells Sark that he's better than him, chucks a disc at his skull, and then fucking kills himself by jumping into a giant hole all in the span of 5 minutes is legendary shit. And at 48th place with 51 votes, by far our most popular foreteller is Master Ava. If you added up the votes for all the other foretellers, it only comes out to a little over half the total votes for Ava, so she really ran away with it. And rightfully so. Despite being a bigger Aced fan than the average bear, because he's the bear one, Ava is also up there for me, and she's very much the mainest of the foretellers, even if she's not the de facto leader. She's got one of the more interesting roles among the foretellers, and her whole plot revolving around creating the dandelions is pretty memorable. There's also the intrigue of her being the only foreteller to not show up in the KH3 epilogue, which leads me to think she'll be something of a bridge between the foretellers and Sora during their inevitable conflict. I also think Ava is just one of the more fun and emotive foretellers. Like, she takes her role incredibly seriously, as do all of them, but she's got a lighter side, like when she squeals over the creation of the first Chirithy. She also doesn't just stay a bootlicker without questioning anything, and gradually wisens up to the master being a shit-stirrer. So she's easily one of, if not the most compelling foretellers, and I'm actually interested to see what they do with her moving forward. Back to a tie here, with two very different characters at 54 votes, starting with the new kid on the block, Yozora. I knew people took a pretty immediate liking to Yozora, but I'm still surprised 54 people decided to put him in their top 5. Like, he looks cool, and his boss fight is in the conversation for best in the series, but we don't really know this guy yet. I just wish I had the amount of faith that you guys do in him, and wherever this Quadratum angle is headed. I've probably said this like 10 times across the channel at this point, but I was initially really apprehensive about how the series was handling anything related to Yozora and Verum Rex. The fact that the original secret ending in KH3 focused pretty heavily on the guy from the video game commercial and Toy Box just had me going, what? Really? It was a big swing, and I didn't really know how to feel about it. Coupled with the fact that Yozora is an obvious conduit for Nomura's misgivings and missed opportunities regarding the cancelled FF13 verses, I started to fear that things were headed off the rails in a major way. But ever since Yozora's additional scenes and boss fight in Remind, along with learning some more about what KH4 is going to be like, I'm cautiously optimistic. You'd have to imagine Yozora's going to end up being some kind of ally. It'd be pretty crazy if he just continues to mug Sora and throw robots at him for a whole game. As long as Yozora doesn't indicate anything remotely in the realm of him having played a Kingdom Hearts video game, I'm willing to see where he and the Unreality stuff go. And tied with Yozora, another character who's the star of their very own video game, it's you, as in the player from Key and Union Cross. So listen, fuck whatever I have to say, and next time I piss you off, you can just remind me that you got more votes than I did in the survey. I'd have to imagine a lot of you put player to be cheeky, or because you just couldn't resist writing the word me and forcing me to count it toward a legitimate character. Just know that I sighed and rolled my eyes every single time. But hey, video games have been doing self-insert stuff for decades. This is just a really straightforward example of it. You can't expect player to be brimming with personality and hard opinions on stuff, because maybe you're boring and centrist about things. Most people are, so it's better to err on that side. It's like Link or Red from Pokemon, they're whatever you want to make of them. And player doesn't talk that much, but probably a bit more than you'd think if you really looked into it. I think their big switcheroo trick at the end of Union Cross is pretty cool, probably their defining moment. Your defining moment, I guess. Also, I want to give a shout out to the 6 of you who voted for Damo or Damien. That is a correct thing to do. Honestly, my biggest gripe with player is that they're called fucking player. I know that's not the in-universe name anyone refers to player as, unless you literally typed in player when asked to name them, but it's still how any official media often refers to this character. I just wish that we could use literally any other phrase that doesn't remind me immediately that we're dealing with a self-insert avatar in a video game, because, well, that kind of takes me out of the moment. Kiwi calls them the unnamed wielder, which I much prefer, but really I'll take any generic-sounding Fallout-adjacent protagonist title. Fucking Keyboy or Keygirl would be an improvement. If at this very moment the title of their wiki page was changed to Franklin Chunderpants, we'd be dealing with a net positive. Anyway, the player is dead, you died, and that's sad. And then you raise Xehanort, which is even sadder. Way to go, Franklin, you raised a fuck-up. We've got another tie here with 55 votes, starting with the Pumpkin King, Jack Skellington. I'm using a Christmas Town background because it looks better. This makes Jack our most popular KH1 party member, barring the obvious two mainstays. I figured it'd be either Jack or Beast in this spot, maybe Beast given his overall larger sense of importance in the first game, but The Nightmare Before Christmas is pretty enduringly popular, so it makes sense. Although it's kind of like a cult classic versus a classic enjoyed by not just a cult, so you'd think the latter would win, but hey. Beast is maybe a bit too gruff and serious for most folks, but Jack is full of whimsy, and we tend to like that around these parts. Unless he asks me to talk about Union Cross characters, then I lose every ounce of whimsy stored in my body. I don't really feel like Jack has an especially close friendship with Sora like some of the other party members I've mentioned. Sora kinda just feels like a helpful ally for whatever plan Jack is working on at a given moment. But like, Jack's having fun, Sora's having fun, that's all that really matters. And Jack serves as a pseudo-mascot for all things Halloween and Christmas, two juggernaut holidays, so he's always gonna scoop up a fair amount of votes in an exercise like this. Big height difference with Jack, but same amount of votes. Tied with him is Chirithy, who's like a Pikachu or Jigglypuff, except it's always serving Kavunt. I know I gave Brains Chirithy some props for its fashion sense, but even the base model is killing it. Like, look at this cape and this purse necklace thing. These are choices, and I think they're working. Chirithys are basically the Kingdom Hearts version of Moogles, adorable race of little animal-esque things who are often pretty sassy and occasionally possess magical abilities. And Ven's Chirithy, the voiced one from KH3, is especially snarky and fun. Like, I hope if I end up in Purgatory, there's at least someone there to make fun of me and do bits. But I'm ignoring the obvious here. Chirithy narrates the versus battles in Melody of Memory, which for a time poisoned my brain and had me saying incoming trick anytime either of those words appeared in my daily life. As a plot device, I think Chirithys are pretty cool. I like how they're the origin point for Dream Eaters and how Keyblade wielders used to get one, again like a starter Pokemon. I guess whatever production facility that makes them still hasn't rebounded from the pandemic because none of our modern characters were given a free pet with their Keyblade. Imagine if Sora also got a free cat when he got the Kingdom Key. Chirithys seem pretty smart. Would it know that Sora has to kill 5 shadows in Traverse Town or ride the dolphin in Atlantica to progress? Well, no, nobody's that smart. And hey, it's only natural for Chirithy to pave the way for other Dream Eaters. In 43rd place with 58 votes is Meow Wow. I know I said I prefer Komori Bat, but I'm not a Meow Wow hater by any means. If it wasn't for Meow Wow, I never would have gotten through Xehanort's DM in his final battle. Obviously, this placement makes Meow Wow the most popular Dream Eater, besides, you know, him. Can I just say, I've always been pissed off by the game implying that this thing is equal parts cat and dog. Like, come on, it's a cat. I know it's like, oh, the name sounds like Bow Wow, and sure, it's got some dog-like features, but anyone who looks at this is gonna call it a cat, right? Wait, am I crazy? Now I kinda wanna do a video where I just go out onto the street with a picture of a Meow Wow and ask people what kind of animal it is. Since this is our last traditional Dream Eater, I figure this spot can also serve as a eulogy for the rest of them. While I found the Dream Eater mechanics in Dream Drop pretty painful and found myself sorely missing actual party members, I don't hate these guys. Like I mentioned earlier with the Unversed, their designs feel distinct enough from the enemy types that preceded it, even if they're often a bit gaudy. But they're dream creatures, it at least makes sense that they kinda look like nonsense. As a species, they also got a bump from the Union Cross revelations, which, sure, maybe it's a classic Kingdom Hearts ass pull, but it doesn't really invalidate anything, and it makes you go back to an older game with some new insight on a previously fairly isolated feature. Like, for me, the Unversed are still just monsters who exist because one guy is having a bad day. It isn't doing a ton for me. So Dream Eaters are alright in my book, and Meow Wow is a suitable face of the brand. Just quit licking the screen. I don't care for that. Another tie here, with 62 votes, we've got yet another cuddly animal, Winnie the Pooh. It really warms my heart to see Pooh make it this far. Like, in a series that delves into some pretty serious and edgy stuff, it's nice that this many people were like, yeah, that's all fine and good, but I can't forget about my man Winnie. Even though he forgot about us that one time. There aren't too many things that have perfect attendance across the numbered games, but Pooh is one of them. And thanks to that, I think Sora has one of, if not the best relationship with Pooh when compared to any of the other Disney characters who aren't Donald and Goofy. And that includes Mickey, because, like, do they really know each other? I never pushed Mickey on a swing, I never shoved his ass out of Rabbit's house hole. I've been through a lot with this sticky, clumsy fuck. I also love how Sora is just Christopher Robin, as if the writers were like, yeah, we don't need both. But it's really funny because Christopher Robin is like a really major part of the Winnie the Pooh franchise. It's like doing Agrabah but without Genie, and Donald's like, yeah, no, I can grant wishes, I have magic and stuff. I know the 100 Acre Wood probably isn't anyone's favorite part of a Kingdom Hearts game, especially in 3, but it's still nice to have around as a refuge from all the hacking and slashing. And how can you be bummed out about going there when Pooh is always so happy to see you? I don't know if KH4 will have the time or space to continue the 100 Acre Wood thread, but a part of me hopes it does. Not just for the tradition of it all, but because in spite of the shortened wood experience in KH3, they were still playing with an intriguing and frankly sad plot thread regarding Sora and Pooh's connection. Sora's getting older, and/or his brushes with Xehanort and Darkness have tainted that childlike innocence he had the first time he arrived in the wood. I'm still a big proponent of the idea that Pooh should wind up in Quadratum because he somehow found his way out of the book, a la the live-action Christopher Robin movie. Again, Sora already killed Christopher and stole his skin, we might as well go all the way with it. Of course, that's way too cool, and I doubt Disney would let something so obviously good come to pass, but I can dream. And tied with Pooh is the runaway winner among the Twilight Town gang, it's Olette. And how fitting is it that she's tied with Pooh? They're both so pleasant, I would love to just watch them chat and interact for a few minutes, that'd be so lovely. Yeah, Olette's cool, she's just a girl, she's just trying to get through school and make some money doing odd jobs, and for whatever reason she hangs out with fucking Hainer and Pence. She's probably the type to remind the teacher to collect the homework, but I won't condemn her just for that. I think Olette won out among HPO because, you know, she's the most normal and relatable, like she's not a super hacker or someone willing to kick a strange old man, she's just Olette, and damn it, that's enough. But don't you fucking cross her in the manga because she's got her trusty nail bat, which I can't believe none of you referenced in any of your responses. And in the games, even though she doesn't have a nail bat or a keyblade, she's still one of the most powerful allies because she's willing to do most of the group project. I would rather go to war than take the reins of a group project, so Olette is a real one for that. Coming in at 40th place with 67 votes is our final World Ends With You character, the leading man himself, Neku Sakuraba. Really sorry to all the Tooie fans who have had to sit through me fumbling through my takes on these guys, I promise it'll all be over soon. Well, maybe I can add something of value as someone who played Dream Drop in 2012 and didn't get around to giving Tooie a shot until like post-pandemic. I was shocked by how much of an asshole Neku is in the original game. They really toned that down for DDD. He was being so mean to Shiki, I hated his guts, whereas in Dream Drop I thought he was kind of aloof and snarky, but not like unpleasant. But his assholery was immediately evident from just the few hours I played of The World Ends With You. I feel like I can safely assume that in his game he undergoes an amplified and more satisfying growth arc than the one we get in Traverse Town, because otherwise there'd be zero reason to like this punk. I'd say I overall enjoyed the vibes and aesthetics of Tooie more than any of its characters or its gameplay, so I don't really have any particularly strong feelings on the Neku we get in Kingdom Hearts. I'm still a little pissed at him for teaching Sora how to flow motion, that's the most negative thing I have to say about his Dream Drop incarnation. And I can always empathize with a character who always has music in their ears to purposefully disassociate. Very Makoto Persona 3 core. Oh fuck, oh god, do you hear that? In 39th place with 70 votes, it's the very bad man, Sephiroth. Like Aerith and Tifa, Sephiroth is always going to siphon up votes in any scenario where he's on a ballot, but in his case, his showing in Kingdom Hearts is actually giving him some extra juice here. Ideally, someone who's playing Kingdom Hearts has at least a passing familiarity with Final Fantasy, but one of my biggest regrets regarding this series is that I had no concept of what Final Fantasy was whatsoever prior to playing KH1. And, I mean, could you blame me? I was 6. I definitely didn't get far enough on my own to encounter Sephiroth at that age, but even still, when I eventually did, I didn't realize how big of a deal this guy was, which is a shame. Retroactively, it's super fucking bonkers that he just shows up as a super boss at Olympus Coliseum, and even without the context of him being the most feared and revered video game villain of all time, he still scared me pissless. And not to mention, he's extremely difficult to fight compared to basically the rest of the entire game. I got walled plenty of times in my early KH1 playthroughs, Stealth Sneak, Giant Ursula, Captain Hook, the list goes on. But as frustrating as those wall moments could feel, I never lost hope that I could eventually get through them. Sephiroth renders a young boy completely hopeless. Like, his sheer range and damage output combined with the fact that he's clearly intended as a challenge for someone who's not just good at the game, but great at it, left young Patty utterly demoralized. I don't think I even beat him until the remix came out. But despite not playing FF7 prior to running into Sephiroth, my experience with him in KH1 and again in KH2 created a separate, still terrifying Sephiroth mythos unique to my own experience. I'm sure there are plenty of folks out there who had a similar chronology to me, or people who have fought Sephiroth in both games and still haven't played any FF7 stuff. So in that way, it's pretty cool how Sephiroth just creates this aura of notoriety around him regardless of your level of familiarity with him. And in 38th place, with 71 votes, it's my fucking dude Auron. Not gonna lie, I'm pretty happy that he just barely beat out Sephiroth, because while I like FF7, FF10 is my shit. Like I said with Titus, if I was really factoring in Auron's appearance in just FF10, he clears most of the Kingdom Hearts cast easily. And I should say, in fact I probably should have said hours ago, I never specified whether or not you should vote for non-KH original characters just based on their showing in Kingdom Hearts or taking their original appearances into account. I wanted to leave that up to you because I think it's more fun that way. That being said, I think Auron is deserving of this many votes even if you don't factor in FF10 because he has a great showing in KH2. It's funny because if you asked me to name every KH2 party member, I'd probably name Auron last, not because he's forgettable, but because it's so surprising yet so perfect that he shows up in the underworld. I've heaped and heaped praise onto this decision for a long time now, and that doesn't stop today. It is the example of perfectly blending Disney and Square in a way that's not only not jarring or tonally inconsistent, but really clever. I can't really talk about how clever it is without getting into Final Fantasy X spoilers, but at this point I'm sure you can read between the lines. I'm one of those people naively holding out a sliver of hope that maybe Donald and Goofy are searching for Auron in the KH4 trailer to get his help in finding Sora, though I'm not holding my breath given how Final Fantasy was sidelined in KH3. But like, the Final Fantasy crew didn't have a ton of reasons to show up in that game, whereas this would feel pretty natural. God, he's so fucking cool. And at 72 votes, it's our last tie for a good while, and again, two very different characters, starting off with Pete. And of course, lumping in votes for Captains Justice and Dark, though some may argue they're completely different guys. Also, any votes for classic Timeless River Pete. Also, the handful of you who voted for specifically Lion Pete. Jesus Christ, this guy has more forms than Sora. Not gonna lie, surprised to see Pete this high up because I figured people found him more annoying than anything. His presence feels especially suffocating in KH2, like he's all over the place, especially for the first half of that game. But he's still fun comic relief. He's the butt monkey, the really out-of-place, freaky, zippered-up cat standing next to one of the most intimidating villains in Disney history. And speaking of Disney history, Pete is fucking old. He's older than Mickey. He's not like this forgotten character, at least not like Epic Mickey would lead you to believe, like they'd still use him and stuff throughout the years. I knew Pete prior to KH2 from the Goofy movies and his appearances on House of Mouse, but I never really considered him part of the core Mickey Mouseverse. So despite how he's this lumbering oaf, I still thought it was a cool pull to make him Maleficent's right-hand man. And maybe this is silly since a lot of the Disney characters in KH are kind of static, but I have hopes for some sort of Pete redemption moment in the games to come. Like, I could very much see him just always cowering to Maleficent and that being his eternal role, but I'd really like for him to somehow pull the rug out from under her and flip over to the good guys, even if only temporarily. I want him to know his worth and leave his toxic place of employment. I think he has it in him. He helped out at the end of KH2. Give him a Keyblade, fuck it. I want to see him do the little Yoda flips that Mickey does. Let Pete bail us out when we die. And like I said, very different vibes here. Tied with Pete is Strelitzia. I really don't intend to be mean here, but fucking how? They killed this girl literally a week after they introduced her. Look, I checked on the Wayfinder project, unsubtle plug, she's in 8 scenes. 3 of these are before she dies. I mean, I know nowadays she has the benefit of being confirmed to be in KH4, but even then, we're still just working with a few lines from her in the trailer. Maybe this is more of an indictment on Skuld, because even though Strelitzia has way less screen time, I at least have things to say about her. Again, it's the storylines happening around the Union Cross characters that I find more interesting than the characters themselves. Strelitzia's murder is a major driving force in Union Cross, and I guess I should emphasize, she was murdered, which is not something that happens very often in these games, so she stands out for that. I mean, not the best reason to be memorable because of how you were killed in a warehouse, but it's something. Her winding up in Quadratum obviously adds some intrigue, but again, more so to just the general KH metaphysics than anything about Strelitzia specifically. I mean, she seems nice. I think it's sad that she was killed. Her name is a flower, and her brother is Laurium, who is the somebody of Marluxia, whose element is flowers. How neat. She did get some cute moments in the few scenes where she was vertical, like I think specifically of her panicking in her bedroom. But she was taken incredibly too soon for me to feel anything about it beyond the basic reaction of, oh, sad, when someone is murdered. Hey, good for her and good for Strelitzia fans. I did not expect her to make this deep of a run into the top 50. She beat a lot of party members who we've spent a ton of time with, some gaming icons, but, you know, cute design. Here we've got our biggest vote gap so far between placements. In 35th place with 81 votes, and fittingly just ahead of Pete is Maleficent. Man, I know she's washed up, but I would have expected just a bit bigger of a gap between her and Pete of all characters. Or, you know, girl who's most famous for being dead. I'm gonna sound like a broken record here, I mean, what else is new, but Maleficent is another character who peaks for me in KH1. If we're just going based off of her first game, she deserves to rise up like another 10 placements. She's legitimately intimidating in that game, a force that you know you'll eventually have to reckon with since her presence looms large from the ending of Traverse Town onwards. Those scenes where you check in with her and the other villains remain some of my favorite parts of KH1. It really keeps the sense of tension and adventure alive and invigorated me to keep playing. I know it's hard for the games to keep her involved and feeling important after Ansem neuters her, like she can't really compete with your organizations and Xehanorts, but I really hope they give her something. Because as sad and Team Rocket-esque her exploits in KH2 are, at least she had exploits, unlike her black box scavenger hunt in 3, which doesn't really even register as a C or D plot. There's no universe where Maleficent is the main or even secondary antagonist in a future Kingdom Hearts game, unless it's some like VCast adjacent phone oddity. And I'm not really asking her to be, but I'd really like her to get in the mix again. Like, give her a W, have her be legitimately in the way of what the real bad guys are trying to accomplish. I want her to be more than an enchanted dominion's thorn in our side. I want her to be an actual obstacle for both Sora and any other parties. As meandering as it is, her interest in the black box partnered with her activity in the mobile games gives me some hope. Of course, if you just accept that Maleficent has been defanged and there's no going back, it is entirely possible to unironically enjoy her as this unintentionally funny and irrelevant pain in the ass. Call me nostalgic though, I'd love to see a return to form. Like, the dragon form specifically. We've got a run of villains here for a bit. In 34th place with 85 votes is Young Xehanort. So this is probably the most contentious entry as to how the votes were distributed. Young Xehanort and Master Xehanort are the same guy. The former grows up into the latter. So it's totally arguable that I should lump votes for either age of Xehanort into one entry. But for a ton of Young Xehanort's screen time, he's existing concurrently with his older self. He's pretty different both visually and personality-wise. They're both members of the true organization, so I figured I would treat them similarly with regards to the survey. That being said, if you just voted Xehanort, I assumed you meant Master Xehanort. In addition, some people explicitly voted for Xehanort as he appears in Dark Road, which is also a young version of the character, but I did count those votes toward this young Xehanort. Like I said at the start of the video a million years ago, I know it's not a perfect system here, so I apologize if this really smacks your fruit balls. Anyway, fuck this guy, I hate young Xehanort. Not for any good reason, to be honest, he's just a dick. I'm not even saying he's got poor characterization or that he's not cool, I just think he's a twerp. His boss fight in Dream Drop, and especially Birth by Sleep, makes me physically ill. Like most people, Xehanort is more interesting when he's older. But I do appreciate how he's one of the few characters who you fight in the KH3 finale who doesn't make nice with you on his way out. He's fully owning up to being a total prick. Maybe young Xehanort just can't shake the baggage of those early boss fights and exposition dumping for me, he just didn't make the strongest first impression. He's lucky Dark Riku is around, otherwise he'd find himself at the bottom of my true organization list. But since we're counting the Dark Road appearance of the character as the same entry here, I actually find him more interesting. Like, it's genuinely cool to see the evolution of Xehanort's thought process and how he grew up into being such a bastard. In 33rd place with 86 votes is our highest ranked Disney villain, Hades. A bit surprised that he beat his former boss Maleficent, but then again, Hades has remained pretty consistent in terms of his performance across the series. He was never the biggest threat, but never a total pushover, so it's not like he has a comparable fall from grace or relevance. If anything, he gets better after 1, because his plan there is kinda stupid and, no pun intended, on the back burner for most of the game. You don't even have to deal with him in a KH1 playthrough if you don't feel like it. His manipulation of Auron in KH2 or the movie-inspired Titan plot in 3 is a lot more exciting, even if the latter doesn't make a ton of sense considering the Titans were around in KH1, but whatever. And most importantly, Hades is always a really engaging performance. I say that as someone who recognizes that James Woods has said some really vile, hateful shit, but he clearly has a lot of fun doing this role. He comes back at basically every opportunity to play Hades. Maybe that's why they keep putting Olympus in Kingdom Hearts. It means less time for old Jamesy to be on Twitter. You know what, since we're here, me pointing out that James Woods is an asshole is sort of a recurring bit, and this always upsets people because they just want me to shut up and talk about the video games. Sometimes these people try to give me passive-aggressive advice about not alienating subsections of my viewer base, not realizing that I am very much trying to alienate anyone who would rush to the defense of a transphobic election denier. If you made it over 2 hours into this video and now you're upset, thanks for your time, and I'm clearly not your guy. But also, like, how are you throwing in with James Woods and that ideology and also consuming Kingdom Hearts? I'm guessing you're just here for the combat, not really absorbing or taking any of the messages to heart, I assume? Anyway, Hades is fine. It's kind of funny how he's the Lord of the Dead, but he's never really been a difficult boss fight in any of his appearances. And I don't know if that's intentional, but it plays really well with the idea that Hades doesn't like to personally get his hands dirty and would rather manipulate or trick people to achieve his goals. So when it's time to throw down, he's kind of sloppy and unprepared. But I mean, why be good at fighting? You're an undead god. If you get your ass beat, you still have a free pass to come back in the next game. Bit of an icy hot combo here. In 32nd place with 87 votes is Vexen. Yeah, so I feel like Lexaeus and Xaldin are the locked-in bottom 2 organization members, and then there's a bit of a gap, but third to last is still pretty comfortably Vexen, just thinking about it on a general consensus scale. Because I think he's got a lot more going on than Xaldin, leagues more than Lexaeus, but he's still going to struggle to get anywhere further than 12th place in the organization because, well, he's creepy and ugly. I feel like Vexen is one of maybe the only adult character in the series who is canonically not meant to be attractive. He's Professor Hojo, but swap out Genova for replicas. He's a frail little basement nerd, and you know he doesn't shower, and he calls women females. But like, at least he has a little arc in KH3. I talked about this in my video that discussed every character's best moment, but Vexen has a sort of hastily thrown together redemption arc in 3, which isn't mind-blowing, but it's at least something of substance. And for what it's worth, while he's still in mad scientist mode, he's fun to watch in a love-to-hate kind of way. And Vexen is honestly a really big unsung hero in KH3. His role as a double agent is like the key reason a lot of your favorite characters were able to get their happy endings. And nowadays, it's wild to see him just chilling with the good guys and shit like Melody of Memory because he used to be so outwardly villainous and detestable. Of course, technically that's Evan, which 4 of you specifically voted for. I don't expect a ton more from Vexen/Evan moving forward, nor do I expect much from any of the other apprentices besides Xigbar, but I'm glad they were able to find some time for him and give him stuff to do in KH3, which can't be said for everyone. And again, for the 4th time in a row with just one more vote, in 32nd place with 88 votes is the Shadow. This is our highest basic Heartless type and the highest basic enemy in general, and for good reason. It's the Kingdom Hearts Goomba, or Slime. The Shadow's design is immediately iconic, and I'm sure for some people synonymous with the word Heartless. Hell, a bunch of characters in the games, especially KH1, just use the phrase Shadows when referring to the Heartless. They're practically interchangeable. It's fascinating how the Shadow is mostly cute, but just unnerving enough that you can tell from looking at it that it's a threat. Probably in the way it moves. It's got that feral quality to it, but you also wouldn't mind hugging a plush of it. Growing up, my cousins and I always called them little ant guys because of their antenna, and because they come in big fucking swarms like someone left a sea salt ice cream lying on the ground. Even though they're the bottom of the barrel as far as Heartless strength goes, they still have a gimmick to them, that being their ability to melt into the floor. I think that's pretty cool. I feel like in most games, the very gruntest of grunt enemies are basically just walking free experience, but the Shadows have some tricks up their sleeves. And they prove that there's strength in numbers, because while I've never died to a Shadow, I've definitely died to a Demon Tide in my day. Alright, finally back to a more heroic figure, and 30th place with 93 votes is Boy Skuld. I mean Ephemer. But really, for my purposes in evaluating him, he's got one small advantage over Skuld, and that's appearing as a voiced 3D model in back cover. I at least know what the guy sounds like. Oh, I guess he has that one moment in KH3 as well. But beyond that, you got me. Seems like a nice lad, pretty Sora-esque, loves his friends, cool scarf. The lifeboat scene with him and Skuld at the end of Union Cross is probably the Ephemer moment that sticks out most in my mind. And it's cool that he's like the first mayor of Scala at Caelum, comes in pretty clutch with all the Union Cross Keyblades during KH3. He's Xehanort's great times whatever granddaddy, which makes it pretty funny that he helps Sora fight against the Demon Tide. Like, even Xehanort's ancestors disavow whatever fuck shit he's trying to do. I guess unless Xehanort had any siblings, the Ephemer family line ended when Xehanort ascended into heaven, so that's kinda sad, I guess. Or maybe Xehanort secretly fathered a child? Ugh. Hard to say if there's really any more Ephemer stuff yet to come. I feel like they could either expand on him and any potential relationships he has to other present-day characters, or just leave him as a relic of the Key era. I'm not gonna pretend I really care what they do with him either way, but congrats on top 30. In 29th place, just shy of 100 votes with 98, is Riku Replica, or Repliku, or Rikupliku. Found a lot of really fun spellings for this one. Gotta say, did not expect Repliku to make it this high up, but in hindsight, I guess it makes sense. He's got one of the most tragic storylines in a series filled with tragic storylines, especially up to KH3, but honestly even including that. In Chain of Memories, he was created, used as a tool of violence, had his sense of self completely fucking wiped, eventually became cognizant of his inferiority to the actual Riku, and then lashed out through an existential crisis. And then he lays on the grass and dies. Which would have been and was sad, but at least merciful, until KH3 gives us some additional info that Repliku wandered the realm of darkness as a disembodied heart for over a year until seeing the real Riku. He joins up with him, emerges during the fights at the Keyblade Graveyard, and gives up his chance at personhood so Naminé can have a vessel, fulfilling that fake promise that he was tricked into making. And then he dies again. I know I said Vexen really pulled through for a lot of characters, but Riku Replica ended up getting the rawest deal, and Vexen was like the main instrument in his creation and stood by as he was used and manipulated. I know Repliku's final decision was his own and he went out peacefully, but it's still like the saddest trajectory for any character, especially post KH3 where almost everyone else got a happy ending. So I have to assume a lot of people just empathize with him and feel sorry for the guy. It's also cool that they brought him back for KH3 at all, because it's a relatively deep pull from an early game in the franchise, so I know I was excited to see it. Also, I wanted to point out, around 30 of the votes for Riku Replica came from people who also used one of their votes for Riku, which I thought was pretty interesting. Some of you Replica voters just can't get enough Riku, but it looks like more of you prefer the Replica over the real deal. Coming in at 28th place, our first character to receive more than 100 votes with 110 is our most popular Union Cross character, Brain. If you somehow haven't noticed yet, Union Cross is right up there with Tui for me, so just bear with me this one last time. It makes sense that Brain placed higher than any of the other UX characters because even I get it. He's got a thing, you know? He's the cool, mysterious guy. Not to say that we haven't had that sort of vibe from other characters before, but I feel like Brain at least sticks out and makes more of an impression when he's surrounded by your Ephemers and Scolds and Ventuses. And not only is he cool and mysterious, he's good with computers. He's like Goth Pence. Also, some might argue that I should be lumping Brain in with Lushu and the whole gaggle of characters that come along with him, but unlike Zigbar, Braig, and Bragi, we know what Brain was like before he ever had any potential possessive interaction with Lushu, so I think it's fair to count the Brain votes separately. Plus, only one of you included Brain when you submitted a Zigbar/Braig/Lushu/Bragi vote. Anyway, as much guff as I give the Union Cross characters, they're all really well designed, and that includes Brain. It takes a lot of charisma to unironically pull off the fedora with a feather, so massive props there. Given that Brain is set to appear in Missing Link, I'd say he's on the fast track to becoming even more popular. If we conducted this survey in one whole Missing Link release from now, who knows how much higher he would have scored. In case you haven't been keeping track, we've got 2 Final Fantasy characters left, and we're about to lose one right now. In 27th place with 119 votes is Cloud. So obviously the other character he was in competition with was Leon, but Cloud actually had a pretty convincing lead for the earlier hours of the survey. It wasn't until the back half that Leon started to pull ahead. If we're judging the characters on their material independent of Kingdom Hearts, I definitely have to give the edge to Cloud, mostly because I haven't played Final Fantasy VIII, though I feel like most people who have played both would also probably pick Cloud. But in the Kingdom Hearts context, Cloud is definitely much more off to the side than Leon, but also gets more cool stuff to do when he does show up. Ignoring the time he got stepped on by Cerberus, that's probably the valley for Cloud's coolness chart. That's his Kingdom Hearts version of saying, let's mosey. It's hard to believe that despite being such an iconic, massive character for Square, the last time Cloud's shown up in Kingdom Hearts was Recoded. And here's me saying that that was actually Data Cloud to keep you from that comment. And here's me saying the statue in KH3 Olympus to keep you from that other comment. And something about Union Cross medals and Dark Road cards. Point being, I know a lot of us were holding our breath for Cloud and maybe even Sephiroth showing up again in Remind, but now that that opportunity has come and gone, I find it hard to believe we'll ever see Cloud in KH again. And it would be cool, but I don't know if we really need it. Like, people always say, oh, they left him versus Sephiroth on a cliffhanger in KH2. But it's like, what do you think was gonna happen? It either drags on forever or Cloud beats him. Like, sign me up to watch another kick-ass cutscene, but we've got plenty of media where Cloud fights Sephiroth. It's 2024, you can have that on the roof of Princess Peach's castle with items on. I still like Cloud for the record, and I especially love his design in KH1. I wish they would have kept it for 2, I find the Advent Children outfits kinda blah. Also, if you count his card in Chain of Memories, Cloud is the most popular summon. If you don't count that, it's Meow Wow. And I guess if you don't count that, it's Stitch. Alright, let's mosey. Okay, moving on to 26th place, and I'd say here is where we get into the real upper tier, like we're starting to approach All-Star territory. There's a case to be made that everyone left is a major player, maybe top of the B list at absolute worst. I also say this because we now have a huge gap in votes between this character and the last. Jumping up to 170 votes is our last Final Fantasy character, Leon. Or are we calling him Squall now? He never sat everyone down and was like, hey guys, I feel like I've sufficiently avenged and restored Radiant Garden, you can call me Squall again. Leon is pretty far and away the face of Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts, like he's the guy. He's not the first Final Fantasy character you run into, but he's the first one you meet who both matters and is actually voiced. He makes a hell of a first impression, and as a kid, there was not a doubt in my mind that Leon isn't supposed to absolutely clown on you effortlessly in that first district fight. From that point on, Leon is kinda like Sora's big brother. He's always there at home base to come back to, and he knows what's going on and what needs to be done. And not to say that Cloud has like no characterization in his KH appearances, but it's kind of cool to see Leon go from someone who's aloof and guarded to a bit more lighthearted and outwardly caring. Like, KH1 Leon almost seems embarrassed at times about wanting to rescue the puppies, but KH3 Leon wouldn't give a shit. He'd be like, yeah, I love dogs. I'm gonna cry if you don't save them. I don't think he ever even cracks a smile or loses his cool in KH1, but in 2 and 3 he actually smiles and expresses how he's worried about Sora after the Battle of 1,000 Heartless. So I appreciate that he's not just a static copy-paste of his FF8 self, who I understand is pretty broody, probably even broodier than Cloud ever gets in any media. Also, Leon is another character they aged up significantly for Kingdom Hearts. He's 17 in Final Fantasy VIII and 25 in KH1. He seemed impossibly ancient when I played the game as a kid, and now I'm older than he is in KH3, so in a word, fuck. Alright, in 25th place, with 179 votes, a king, but not quite king of this survey, it's Mickey Mouse. While it may seem crazy for like the face of animation to be at 25th, in Kingdom Hearts, Mickey isn't that present, so I think this spot makes sense. He's never a constant presence in the way that any playable characters or Donald and Goofy are, like he's an A-lister, but maybe an A- lister. His most consistent presence in a game is probably actually Recoded. In 1, he obviously just has that ending appearance, and in most other games, Mickey's only around for some of the time. Notice I call him Mickey because I have moved past the Michael hatred arc. He's not that bad. He can be a bit overbearing at times, but he's not a war criminal. It was a bit that went on for too long and got out of hand. He's an easy punching bag, but the fact of the matter is, in Kingdom Hearts, he's an acrobatic little badass. Like, part of me wants to be cynical about it and say something snarky about him being a corporate mascot, but I mostly just want to enjoy how this icon of our childhoods is sharing screen space with Final Fantasy characters and kicking mountains of ass. At the end of the day, it's just kinda cool. I do wish he was a bit more fun, though, if that makes sense. There's other Mickey media out there where he gets to be something besides the happy-go-lucky everyman, and I wish the Kingdom Hearts take on Mickey would borrow from that media on occasion. Like, I'm not saying he's only a happy-go-lucky everyman in Kingdom Hearts. That archetype isn't often casting stopsa or swearing vengeance for their dead friends. I just want him to joke around more. I'm curious to see how they use Mickey moving forward, especially after that Riku quote in Remind where he says that he, Donald, and Goofy have been searching for glues in every past world that Sora's been to. That probably seemed really weird if you didn't watch the bad quotes bracket. At this point, I don't think it's going to be anything that isn't just worked into either the prologue or the entirety of KH4, but it sure would be cool if they do something like a 0.2 again. I would totally be down for a Mickey-led game that lasts a few hours, why not? In 24th place, with 181 votes, is our next member of the organization, and I was really curious who would land in this spot. It's Zexion. Like I said earlier, Lexaeus, Zaldin, Vexen is a pretty solid bottom 3 for the organization, but the spot after was a total mystery to me, and I would have believed like 5 or 6 other members landing here. But I suppose it makes sense. Zexion's major game is Chain of Memories, and only in the shorter Riku campaign. He gets a fair amount of screen time in KH3, more than most of the other apprentices, but he's become another tech support man-in-the-chair type character, so not exactly shaking things up in a big way. Interestingly though, Zexion was by far the organization member who received the highest percentage of votes for his somebody counterpart. 60 votes went towards specifically Ienzo, with 36 written as Zexion/Ienzo. I remember saying in a past video that Zexion and Ienzo do feel pretty distinct from each other, more than someone like Zaldin and Dylan or Vexen in Heaven. Like, they've all flicked the good versus evil switch, but Ienzo is just so much more pleasant and accommodating, so I could see people voting for him just based on that. I always like Zexion, maybe just because I used to have his hairstyle. Really fucked up that they gave the org member who loves reading a giant swoop of hair that blocks his eyesight. Comes from the same minds who took away one of the sniper's fucking eyeballs. I definitely prefer Zexion over all the other organization members we've covered, but I don't know if he's necessarily more interesting or has a more compelling story arc. Outside of being the strategist of the basement crew in Castle Oblivion and the illusion stuff, which is all very cool, there's not too much to him. His whole thing of being Ansem the Wise's adoptive son and the sense of guilt he carried after the coup is at least something. For the record, I'm not like demanding that every single character has like some earth-shattering backstory or development, I just tend to be fonder of characters who do. It's not a failing for any of these characters to be a bit more off to the side and not have much meat to them. Sometimes they can just be cool goth guys with illusion powers, and that's totally fine, and more often than not, fun in its own right. And at 23rd place, with 208 votes, we're losing another organization member, and if you asked me prior to KH3 who's fourth from the bottom, I probably would have said Luxord. Not Luxord, I do not know who that is. Prior to KH3, Luxord was right alongside the mute guard couple in terms of screen time and development. He was the guy who made gambling puns. I've said before that unlike a Xigbar who felt intentionally mysterious, Luxord felt accidentally sidelined and underdeveloped. But I think KH3 really injects a lot of excitement into Luxord's prospects. It's not even that he gets loads more screen time, but the scenes he does get are much more engaging than anything he had in 2 or Days. It's like a switch was flipped and Luxord has a lot more awareness and suspicion about what's going on around him. And he displayed the occasional example of that in older games, but he never really pried or acted on it. But between the wild card he tosses to Sora in the graveyard, his extremely tense convo with Xigbar in Remind, and the appearance of his Widow's Peak after beating Izora, I think Luxord is headed for a much bigger role moving forward. And that feeling is bolstered by the established fact that Luxord is one of Nomura's favorites. I know I personally went from feeling less than meh about Luxord to being genuinely excited to see what happens with him after playing KH3 because he was really fun to watch. Even in scenes that don't really deal with hidden machinations or the future of the series, he's still entertaining just through how he talks. A lot of other organization members are poised and well-spoken, but Luxord just comes off differently, probably because there's a lot less malice behind his words than his comrades. It's like he's way too smart for most of the shit that's happening around him, but he's got nothing better to do and loves a good show, and he's just biding his time to make a move. And speaking of time, unlike most organization members whose elemental powers are pretty much randomly assigned or at least feel that way, I think Luxord's could have actual plot implications. I don't think it's a coincidence that the aforementioned Remind conversation is framed as a conflict between time and space. But in a word, Luxord is cool, and he's only getting cooler, so this placement makes sense to me. In 22nd place, with just one more vote than Luxord at 209, is the big bad himself, Master Xehanort. So again, if we did lump in the votes for young Xehanort, he'd be in 18th place. Regardless of which way you count them, I was kinda surprised that the series' main antagonist didn't even crack into the top 15. I feel like a lot of media similar to Kingdom Hearts, whether it's video games or anime or whatever, have really popular villains, oftentimes rivaling the main heroes. But after thinking about it a bit, I think Xehanort as a guy is less interesting and entertaining than his plots or any of the pawns in his big game of chess. He's the puppet master, which is usually a really fun type of character, and I'm not saying Xehanort isn't fun, I think he just gets overshadowed by the huge cast of characters caught up in his schemes. I think Xehanort's best game is obviously still his debut in Birth by Sleep. Not just because he's voiced by Leonard Nimoy there, and don't think it's a super hot take to say that he did it the best, but because he's the most gleeful about his villainy in that game. In KH2, and especially 1, the main villains are more withheld or even outright hidden, which serve those games' plots perfectly well. But when the player has dramatic irony on their side, and knowing fully well that Xehanort is BBS's main antagonist, it's kind of fun to just watch him do his work for the entire game. But outside of Birth by Sleep, even though he is the main antagonist, he's not actually around a ton. The guy doesn't show up until the very end of both Dream Drop and KH3. Instead, his presence extends to other games through his vessels or alternate selves. But the Bald Man himself was used relatively sparingly. I think that also helps contribute to his lower placement here, since 2 of his more iconic offspring have been around for longer and consequently been in more stuff. I do think there's more depth to Xehanort than someone like an Ansem or Xemnas, but I don't really like him as much as those guys. His whole shtick is the enlightened centrist angle, light and dark should exist equally, which I guess is slightly more nuanced than darkness conquers all worlds, but it's not really something we haven't seen before. Still, the lengths he's willing to go to achieve his goals make him a memorable and pretty detestable villain, even if the games try to give him the misunderstood small bean treatment on occasion. Moving on to 21st place with 226 votes is yet another organization member, Saïx. Right around the middle of the pack seems like the right spot for Saïx. He's probably got more depth and fleshed out motivations than 2 or 3 of the organization members above him, but they're simply more fun and less deadpan. I've never been a huge Saïx guy because I tend to find his shtick a little boring. Like, he's the guy that all nobodies should act like if what we initially believed about nobodies was actually true. Turns out an emotionless workhorse isn't someone who I find exceedingly entertaining, but from a writing or character perspective, it's spot on. Since we know that all nobodies are capable of regrowing hearts and having emotions, it sheds some new light on Saïx. It seems to me that of the organization, he just always made one of the stronger efforts to fully lean into Xemnas' nobody narrative as a means of protecting himself. He had strong attachments to Lee and Subject X prior to becoming a nobody, and went on to feel forgotten and slighted by his old friend. So I think he's really just suppressing any potential fledgling emotions in an attempt to keep himself from getting hurt again. Because that's kind of Saïx's whole thing. He's the spurned ex-boyfriend who's too afraid to open up, and that finally all reaches resolution when he quote-unquote dies in KH3. Really interesting and compelling stuff, it just doesn't make for the most outwardly entertaining material in my opinion. But I do think his callousness and cruelty towards Sora, and especially Xion, make him really fun to hate, which is the mark of a great villain. It was so satisfying to take him down in both KH2 and Days. And the contrast between his cold and calm demeanor with his absolute batshit behavior during those boss fights is really memorable, and another big hint that the whole no emotions thing is a bunch of bullshit. Also, I think his double agent role in KH3 is actually really fun, especially that sequence where he's trying to jog Xion's memory. He's on that same remorse train along with Ansem the Wise and Vexen, but he really committed to the role. Like, he got his shit rocked by Roxas and Shion, deservedly so. I would love to see Saïx get some more content, whether it's in KH4 or a different game. I want to see more of his friendship with Lee, since I love their dynamic in that one Birth by Sleep scene, and I'm fascinated by the Subject X stuff and how that ties into everything from the Key era. Of the organization members we've talked about so far, Luxord and Saïx definitely have the most promising prospects moving forward. Alright, we're now in the top 20. 7 lights and 13 darknesses make 20, so fittingly in 20th place is the guy behind everything, with 264 votes, the Master of Masters. This makes him the most popular character to originate in the Key saga. This is a pretty insane placement for the Master, and I don't hate it. I think it's a real testament to his performance in back cover and his one scene in Remind that he managed to beat nearly half the organization and Master Xehanort. Ray Chase brings so much energy to the role, and it's honestly really refreshing to have someone in the antagonist spot who's not all doom and gloom. He's having a ton of fun even though he's trying to pull off some universe-altering shit. Put simply, the Master is a gigantic troll, and it's a really welcome change of pace after nearly 2 decades of primarily self-serious darkness peddlers. No, in fact, the Master is the exact opposite, at least on the surface. He's on a crusade to completely annihilate darkness, which is, again, a really interesting position for an antagonist in this series to take. It's hard to even call him an antagonist yet, because while his plot with the Foretellers is manipulative, it's relatively obscured when compared to the stuff Xehanort gets up to, so it doesn't have that outright villainous quality to it, at least not yet. But I have been all in on all things MOM ever since I first saw him in back cover. Which, hard to believe it's already been 7 years since that. And while we've seen moments where the Master gets more serious, he still usually gets back to a pretty jocular attitude not long after. What I'm really looking forward to is him getting angry. When the funny guy is pissed off, that's the scariest type of shit. I want like a full-blown meltdown from this guy. I want finale of Death Note type of shit. For any other character as new as the Master, I'd probably be skeptical of such a high placement, but I can't blame anyone for putting a lot of faith in this guy. Coming in at 19th place with 271 votes is our first main antagonist, Ansem. Another potentially weird one in terms of vote counting, but if you said just Ansem, it went here. I feel like if you meant the Wise, you would have said it. When I hear Ansem, I still think of the first guy we met who called himself that. But thankfully most of you specified Ansem, Seeker of Darkness, or Xehanort's Heartless, or something else to designate that it's this guy. I feel like this is kinda low for Ansem, but then again, I didn't really care much about the guy until KH3. I've talked ad nauseum about how much I love his death scene in 3, how it doubles as a speech to both Riku and the player. It also serves as an end cap for the main trait that sets Ansem apart from the other villains with similar personalities and motivations in the series, which is that he fucking loves to learn. That's his thing. He loves darkness, sure, but he really just wants to learn more stuff, to seek things. Which isn't an inherently negative trait, he's just willing to possess and kill kids about it. And by that same token, Ansem hates dumbasses. Like, he's gonna make fun of you if you lack a basic understanding of the world or flaunt that sort of prideful ignorance. If you're someone who responds to a long video or comment with, "Wow, bro's yappin'," Ansem's gonna use the Cum Guardian to kill you. And I really respect that. Granted, as much as Ansem thinks he understands the world and how it works, he's often wrong about it, so much so that he dies because he gambled really poorly on what was behind door number 1. But who doesn't enjoy seeing a know-it-all get their ass handed to them every now and then? He's not like a super complex villain, but he's fun to watch and satisfying to defeat. Can't be overstated how chilling his KH1 performance is, and how little I was expecting him to be the guy behind the scenes waiting to swoop in and steal Maleficent's credit. I mean, it's pretty obvious in retrospect, but again, I was 6 at the time. Wasn't anticipating the barely visible potato sack man from the secret place to come back and be the final boss. Also, my little sister would always exclusively refer to him as handsome, and I mean, he's not. Still don't know why he had to be shirtless for the final fight. I think he just wanted to show off. And fittingly, following the bad guy from the first game is the bad guy from the second game. In 18th with 285 votes is Marluxia. Yeah, I meant second as in literally the second, not KH2. Me personally, I'm usually more engrossed by what Ansem's doing on screen at any given moment than Marluxia, but speaking of handsome, he does have that beautiful head of hair that's gotta be earning him some points with the voters. I think Marluxia also has the advantage of clearly having some more stuff coming down the pike, whereas Ansem is pretty much a closed book, at least he better be. Not because I don't like Ansem, but because, again, that death scene is so good, I don't want it tarnished. Like Zexion, Marluxia was another org member who got a decent amount of votes for his somebody counterpart. 32 for just Lauriam, and 24 for Marluxia/Lauriam. So far, Laurium's only been in Union Cross, and he's basically just nice Marluxia. Same degree of poise and elegance, just not willing to use Naminé as a human shield yet. Or nobody's shield, technically. But yeah, considering Marluxia died and then was on good terms with Sora on his way out, or I guess way back into being his somebody self, we're gonna be seeing him again. And I'd be shocked and frankly disappointed if he's not featured at least moderately in KH4. Since Sora's recently gone to a world where Laurium's dead sister's been living for who knows how many years, seems like a pretty natural place to get him more involved. In terms of what we've already gotten from Marluxia though, I think he's fine. He's probably like my 4th favorite org member from Castle Oblivion because he sort of just came off as default bad guy in Chain of Memories. He's cold and ruthless and calculated, but those are all words I'd also use to describe an Ansem or Xemnas or Cyax or Zaldin. He just didn't really have a thing from my perspective besides the occasional use of an SAT word. I guess the crux of Marluxia is his treachery, that he's been entrusted this castle by his boss and he's going to take advantage of the promotion and take over the whole company. But honestly, if half or most of you just voted for him because the scythe is cool and he's a beautiful flower boy, that's totally valid. In 17th place, we have another big gap in votes, the biggest so far. With 363 votes is Marluxia's partner in crime, Larxene. Even though Larxene kinda plays second banana to Marluxia in both Chain of Memories and KH3, she 100% deserves to beat him in my opinion. We've talked about a handful of characters who enjoy being bad, but I don't think any of them relish in their villainy quite as much as Larxene does. I mean, she's a self-proclaimed bad guy, like she knows she is a vile, evil person. So I'm not surprised she scored this high, and frankly I expected her to score maybe just a placement or two higher. Larxene is like the female villain of Kingdom Hearts. I mean, there's Maleficent, but she's from Disney, and Larxene has already lapped her in terms of sheer wickedness. And I guess she doesn't really have much competition, all the other bad guys are, well, guys. But still, it's refreshing to see someone like her just commit to being irredeemably evil. I'm sure she will get some form of redemption, because Kingdom Hearts, but like young Xehanort, she didn't really go out all sunshine and roses in the graveyard. Arguably less hostile than usual, but still snarky and rude, and I really hope she holds on to some of that if and when she shows back up as Elrena. Very few of you voted for Elrena specifically, literally just 2 of you. Only 7 bothered to say Larxene/Elrena, so it's clear that the people are here for Larxene. For children slapping, Demyx insulting Larxene, not sure is in a few scenes Elrena. Like, I'm not gonna expect her to be on the good guy side and act like she does in Chain of Memories, but I need her to stay rude and begrudging. Like, if she's gonna swoop in at some moment and save Sora, I need her to also call him a dipshit in the process. If they chibi-wash Larxene into being her boring PNG Elrena self, I will be the one leading the riots. At the same time, I think there's a great opportunity to delve into why Larxene is so sadistic and cruel. Like, I'd love for there to be some backstory or reasoning behind that. Just don't have it all go away. Sometimes fucked up shit happens to a person and it makes them fucked up and we can understand how and why, but that doesn't necessarily mean that person is ever gonna do a complete 180. I also want to say I'm really proud that not one of you 363 used the phrase mommy or step on me when casting a vote for Larxene. It honestly means the world to me. Because I had to read a lot of thirsty, nasty ass shit directed at less predictable characters, so small blessings. And with 399 votes in 16th place, much to Larxene's chagrin, is Demyx. It's so funny that he beat her by just 1 spot. And I fully expected him not to. I sort of figured people also found Demyx annoying. But for the record, I voted in the survey, and this is the first appearance of a character who I voted for. So all my characters are in the top 16, I guess I went pretty normie with it. Looking at all these characters objectively from the perspective of like who's the most fleshed out and well-defined, Demyx has absolutely zero business beating an Ansem or Xehanort, probably not even a Cyax. Thankfully, this is a subjective exercise, and Funny Mullet Man says Dance Water Dance. A decent handful of you, by the way, voted Demyx and then parentheses or / Master of Masters, which, please don't do that. That kills the man. It is highly disturbing that Demyx is the organization member whose past we have the least information on. Unlike a Luxord or Isa, his path forward in the series is even less clear, like there's no concrete thread or setup for him, but it would be really weird if he winds up being the only one who we don't eventually get the true name for, or backstory regarding his time prior to joining the organization. He's implicated in that scene in the Keyblade Graveyard where Xemnas talks about the ancient Keyblade legacy, but we still don't have any follow-through on that. So the road ahead for Demyx is terrifyingly wide open, and while I'm interested to see where it goes, his future prospects have basically nothing to do with why I voted for him. I just love how in a group of 14 mostly self-serious edgelords, Demyx is like, man, I fucking hate meetings, this is so boring. I also love how in his early appearances, Demyx is really anti-hard work. He'll do anything to get out of doing anything. So sometimes escaping responsibility ends up being more work than just doing the thing. But by the time he shows up in KH3, he's so starved for attention, he'll put in however much work he needs to so he can get just a shred of recognition. This is also my arc. It was not long after KH3 that I made my YouTube channel. So for me, Demyx is as relatable as they come. I'm glad so many of you also appreciate him because I really didn't think he'd make it this far. So, I can't fucking believe this, but of course, because it's Kingdom Hearts, there's a tie here, meaning we're gonna have a definitive top 13. Somehow, these next two characters both got exactly 440 votes, starting with Vanitas. I'm surprised Vanitas made this deep of a run, but I really shouldn't be. I've heard both him and another character still left described as something like Kingdom Hearts characters made in a lab specifically for Tumblr, and yeah, that checks out. Even though he's pretty underserved across his, like, 2 major appearances, you can't really expect Sora but with black hair to not pull in 300 votes just based on that alone. I'm not like anti-Vanitas for the record, I've actually grown to enjoy him more over time. I feel like his KH3 performance is pretty polarizing since HJO goes like all in on the gravelly snarling, but I think it's so fun. Even though his mask is on for most of the game, you just know he's delivering all of these venti-wenti type lines with a shit-eating grin. If nothing else, you can hear it in his shit-eating voice. It's also kind of fun to have a villain around who's like a teenager, or, you know, physically in the same age bracket as the heroes. Most of the bad guys in this series are fully grown adults bullying children, or younger iterations of said adults. It wasn't really since Riku, or technically Riku Replica, that there was an antagonist who's just a kid. And even the Rikus were just manipulated or misguided in their antagonist roles, whereas Vanitas' blood type is villainy. He literally is darkness, and that's a whole other Union Crossian can of worms, but he takes so much joy in being evil, or he would if he knew what joy was. Even still, I fully expect some sort of redemption moment for Vanitas, like we know he's coming back, and hopefully the best is yet to come for him. Because while I find him fun to watch, he never really broke beyond the for the evils wall for me. I still think there's a ton of potential there though. Like most people, I think underneath the veneer of hatred and anger is a lot of sadness, and I expect that to be explored a bit more whenever Vanitas is back on our screens. And tied with Vanitas, and I can't believe these characters are equally popular, is Donald Duck. I guess they're both angry? Alright, now I'm part of the problem because I didn't use one of my votes on him, but I think Donald deserves to be a little higher than this, a little higher than Vanitas. I had no illusions about the fact that Donald was always going to lose out to Goofy, but as pleasant as Goofy is, I'd still probably rather watch Donald on my screen than Goofy, like 9 times out of 10. But I mean, I get it, we've had an equal amount of time with both, the one who isn't ever a dick is going to get a bigger share of the votes. And I don't think anyone really dislikes Donald, it'd be pretty wild to be holding a grudge from like the time he abandoned Sora in 2002. I guess the LOL Donald is a bad healer propaganda might be working against him, but I do think it's just generally because he's not as lovable as Goofy is. I was never particularly a huge fan of Donald or Goofy, or really any of the Mickey-centric characters outside of Kingdom Hearts, but the games made me like them all a lot more, especially Donald and Goofy. I don't know if Donald was ever associated with like magic or spellcasting prior to Kingdom Hearts, but I think it's a really good fit for him here. And most mage characters, I feel like, are a lot more even keel and less piss-offable than Donald, so I like the personality job class combo there. Not that I really need anything like this from Donald Duck or Goofy, but they're fairly static characters in Kingdom Hearts, even less so than Mickey, who at least has like an evolution in ideology regarding light and darkness. But between Donald and Goofy, I guess Donald would have to be the one who we've seen more quote-unquote character development from, if only judging by his KH1 outing. In the beginning, he clearly doesn't really care for Sora as a friend, he's just the means to their king-locating end. But by the end of the game, there's an actual friendship there after a little bit of turbulence along the way. Since then, he and Goofy have basically been in lockstep with regards to their relationship to Sora. If he gets pissy about Naminé and Castle Oblivion, the angst is directed at both of them, not just one. I don't really expect anything more than status quo stuff from Donald and Goofy moving forward, but that's fine. They're steady, they're staying the course, which ends up being a massive comfort in a series with a lot of crazy shit going on. They're your two dads, and they're always going to have your back. I haven't mentioned Zetaflare yet in this section, so here's me doing that. It's really cool. Okay, we've officially entered our incredibly fitting Kingdom Hearts Top 13. Kicking off this elite group with 498 votes is Ventus, but his friends call him Ven. So Ventus is our lowest member of any of the Kingdom Hearts original trios, and that tracks for me. I know, he's like the precious cinnamon roll boy, but that's never really been something that spoke to me. I always found Ventus boring and nondescript, and lo and behold, it turns out he's actually from Union Cross times, a period where being boring and nondescript was endemic, so it all makes sense now. I'm mostly just being a dick for fun here. Mostly. But it's almost like they knew Ven was the least fun out of TVA, so they gave him this comparatively interesting backstory involving being one of the new Union leaders to make up for it. And for what it's worth, thanks to the direction things are heading in with Lucio and the Foretellers, I'd say there's good odds Ven's gonna have a lot more time to shine given his forgotten connection to the Key era. Some way or another, he's gonna regain all those lost memories, and maybe that'll fuck with his little head so much it'll make him interesting. And so we're clear, I don't hate Ven, I just kinda nothing him, like he's there, he looks like Roxas, but without the cool factor and maybe only about half of the trauma. But I guess there's at least an explanation for why Ven is relatively boring or overly sweet, and it's because he's a pure light. People joke about him being a princess, but for all intents and purposes, his heart composition isn't really unlike that of a princess of heart. Go figure, having a bit of darkness in your heart makes you a little more entertaining. But I do think the dilemma he faces in Birth by Sleep regarding him having to fight Vanitas to form the Keyblade is pretty compelling. And like having the darkness forcibly removed from you and being abandoned by your former master is a pretty rough go of things. And also, the whole being possessed by darkness to kill a girl ordeal. Alright, so he's had his fair amount of trauma too, but I guess for whatever reason, I've never really been gripped by how Ven deals with any of it. No shade to any of the Ven voters out there, I wish I enjoyed him as much as you guys do. But like some other characters we've already discussed, I think we might be in store for some more nuance and development moving forward. Once again, we have a big gap in votes, just one vote more than our previous biggest gap. In 12th place, with 577 votes, is the superior Xemnas. I feel like over the years, Xemnas has always been more popular than Ansem, but for me, I always kind of held them in the same estimation. I definitely came away from KH3 liking both of them more, but I think Ansem just slightly eclipsed his nobody counterpart. Still, I think Xemnas really leans into the fact that he is the superior, like this motherfucker is just schooling people without breaking a sweat. He gives off real BLE for the entire game, that's big lightsaber energy. Listening to Axel's fuck-ass Deadpool speech and then just breaking his shit and being like, "Are you done?" And then proceeds to laser the fuck out of him. The tides turn against Xemnas and he's like, "Oh, I'll just kidnap Kairi with my awesome wrist grab technique." He's just so effortlessly good and remarkably efficient. I know KH3 wasn't his game, but it's easily my favorite outing for him. Even though he gets more screen time in KH2, I still feel like he's underserved, and I didn't really feel all that much toward him by the time we keybeam him in the World of Nothingness. I'm sure I made him proud considering how little feeling I had for the whole occasion. Like, gratifying ending, KH2 is one of the best endings to anything I've ever played, but I was way more satisfied to take down Saïx than Xemnas. I guess I just would have liked a handful more scenes of him throughout the game, just a bit more of him fawning over the moon or bossing around some peons. Unlike Ansem in KH1, we know that the guy running the organization is our main antagonist as early as the Mysterious Tower. We may not know his name the whole time, but we know what we're up against. There's no 11th hour switcheroo. The villain twist in KH2 isn't about hiding the villain until it's their time to strike, it's more so about the true identity and origin of the villain, which we learn about at the halfway point. So I guess I always just found it a bit underwhelming that they keep him relatively obscured for most of the game when I never felt like there was much of a reason to, considering there's no big truth bomb waiting to be dropped. Especially in the original release. Thankfully, Final Mix does add more Xemnas content, including his awesome slow walk down the stairs. Like Ansem's, I'm a big fan of Xemnas' death scene. It doesn't really reach me personally in the same way as Ansem's, but it's such a poetic end to this guy who lorded over his minions. Because that was his whole thing. He was the superior, he was the leader of the bunch, even though I felt like I never really knew him that well. And here he is, dying, finally realizing that he took those minions for granted. I went from feeling pretty whatever about Xemnas to viewing him as an oddly tragic figure. Still a bastard, absolutely, but I couldn't help but feel a little sorry for him. So while I'd probably rather watch like 2/3 of the organization on my screen, I think Xemnas is still a fun time, especially given, as many of you noted, his amazing voice. So I don't hate the placement for him here. In 11th place, with 618 votes, easily our most popular Disney character is Goofy. Yeah, so Donald and Goofy were separated by 178 votes, so not a blowout, but Goofy's still the clear favorite here. I actually combed through the data, and it was only 150 people who spent 2 of their votes on both Donald and Goofy. Which makes sense. I feel like most people would just want to pick their favorite of the two and use their other 4 votes on original characters. Some people didn't read the rules and tried to vote for Donald and Goofy as one entry, and the rules state that if you do something like that, they only count the vote for the first character you list, so any votes like that went to Donald. Because nobody says Goofy and Donald. Anyway, I feel like I covered my general thoughts on the two as a duo, so I won't spend too much time here on Goofy because they obviously go hand in hand. But like, Goofy's the man. He's not the strongest, he's not launching Zeta flares, but I think I'd have to pick him to back me up in a fight. Not like a Kingdom Hearts fight, I mean like a street brawl with broken bottles and shit. Goofy's just not gonna let anything happen to me. I always thought it was funny how any paratext surrounding Goofy, especially earlier in the series, notes that he's not much of a fighter and that's why he uses a shield. He doesn't like fighting, so he prioritizes defense, as if he doesn't totally still use the shield to just bash the fuck out of anyone who steps to him. Like, whoever's running the PR department for Goofy is doing a phenomenal job. I've also always been a fan of how the games let Goofy be the clear smartest of the trio, so long as it's not the Country of the Musketeers version of the character. I feel like it would have been really easy to make Sora the most competent one, and his Disney companions are struggling to keep up, but no, Goofy's often the one with the clearest picture on things. I'm happy to see Goofy make it this far, considering he's among some truly beloved original characters up here. And if some of you jokers voted for Goofy instead of the rock that killed him, he could have made it into the top 10. Yes, that's right, number 11 and 10 were separated by only 2 votes, so this could have changed if the survey was left open for just a little bit longer or closed a tiny bit earlier. But in 10th place with 620 votes is our next trio member, Kairi. I'm honestly not sure how to react here. I feel like this is either pleasantly surprisingly high or depressingly low. I mean, she should be higher in a perfect world. She's a character who's been around since 2002, who does have a really important role in the series, but, you know, I think I'd be belaboring the point to go on and on about how underutilized she's been in the franchise. I don't think there are too many people out there who dislike Kairi, they just want to see more from her, but she keeps getting sidelined. Out of every character in this survey, Kairi was the one where people most often specified which Kairi they meant, and it was almost always Kingdom Hearts 1. Which, I don't think Kairi is like a total bore in the other games, but I'd probably have to agree that she's the most fun in KH1. And even then, she spends so much of the game being kidnapped and asleep. Still, I think Sora and Kairi's relationship has always been really sweet. I like how both of them have had to save each other on numerous occasions. Because that's one thing I'll push back on, the people who say Kairi is weak or useless, because I don't think she is. I think it's totally fair to take umbrage with how she's written or her change in personality, but she's not like dead weight and only ever in need of rescue. Sure, she has been in need of rescue, but she's the one saving Sora from being a Heartless or bringing him back in the Keyblade Graveyard. She nearly rolled her fucking ankle jumping in to try and help him in KH2, so I don't want to hear it. There are people out there who have genuine disdain for this girl for like no good reason, and I think that's weirdo behavior. But I know most of us want like a major Kairi role, whether it's her own game, and sorry Melmem, you don't count, or at the very least a split campaign. I've been banging the drum for a split campaign where Sora goes to some more realistic properties in Quadratum, while Kairi gets to do the more traditional animated stuff with Donald and Goofy. Like, how fun would that be? I feel like it would really give them an opportunity to flesh Kairi out and give her more to do, and I'd love to see the banter with her in D&G. Or you know what? Give her Minnie and Daisy. Maybe then Minnie could scrounge up more than 2 votes. In 9th place with 650 votes, the next character who I cast a vote for, it's Xigbar. And of course that means Lushu as well. And get in here, Braig, you count for this too. Oh Jesus Christ, that's enough, no more. So given that this guy is so many guys, that makes for a pretty interesting vote breakdown, and I'm sorry if anyone's mad that I've lumped them all together, because his placement does change depending on if I do or don't. Of the 650 votes here, 451 were just for Xigbar. But if you count the votes that were Xigbar / that person or this person or the other, we get another 119, and bringing the count to 570. For the record, the most common iteration of that was Xigbar / Lushu, but you also had Xigbar / Braig / Lushu, just Xigbar / Braig, or Xigbar / Braig / Lushu / Bragi. Now, of course, some of you just wrote Lushu, and I can't really discern if you're referring to only his appearance in Union Cross and back cover, or if you're referring to the entire Lushu experience, including his other forms, so it just made the most sense to put these votes here. There were 70 votes for just Lushu, but adding in the other votes where Lushu is included, we get a total of 171. Meaning if I did count Lushu and Xigbar separately, Xigbar would have placed 13th and Lushu would have placed 26th. Of course, there's also the ride or die Bragi fans out there. All 5 of you. And only 11 of you bothered to include Bragi aliside any others when voting, so yeah, he's not the most top of mind. Interestingly, 4 of you voted for just Braig, with 1 of you voting Braig/Luciu, the only time I saw that combination. I still can't get over how Luciu was a guy named both Bragi and Braig, and potentially a third guy named fucking Brain? He's got really specific criteria for this shit. Anyway, I love Xigbar, and I've loved him even before he was implicated in this grand Master of Masters conspiracy. I firmly believe I would have voted for him even prior to KH3, which I think only naturally gave him a huge popularity boost. I think Xigbar's always been decently popular, but pre-KH3 I could totally see him losing out to the Demixes, Larxenes, and Marluxias of the world. I just always loved that detached, surfer bro, fuck it who cares attitude he's got, and I'm particularly fond of the idea that he adapted those sort of lax characteristics from the Master, because Luciu as we see him in back cover isn't like Xigbar at all. And I was never 100% clear if Braig ever existed as his own person and then Luciu possessed him, or if Braig was always this constructed personality of Luciu's and we've only ever seen him post-possession. But imagine Braig just walking around Radiant Garden with a completely different personality, like he loves bird watching and doing the Sunday crossword. Since we know Xigbar is going to be involved moving forward, I hope he keeps his Xigbar personality and doesn't revert to his original Luciu self, which would be both strange and not as entertaining. I also kind of want him to backstab the Master, or maybe even join the good guys to help take him down. I think that could be really fun. Because I don't think Luciu was really a bad guy as we first saw him. He was manipulated like all the others into carrying out his role. I'll be fine if he goes down with the Master ship, but I certainly won't be mad if he goes for some kind of late-stage power play. Part of me is still in shock that the guy running away like a guilty toddler in the Land of Dragons is like such a major player in the series, but I'm really glad he is. Alright, in 8th place, only separated from Xigbar by 9 votes with 659, is Naminé. Really impressed by how many of you went out of your way to type the accent over the E, by the way. I know my lazy ass would have been voting for Namine, like GBA calm, I don't know what accents are yet style. I guess I never really had a great gauge on Naminé's personality because I was pretty surprised to find her this high up. If she placed in the 20s, I probably wouldn't have bat an eye. I guess she's been pretty beloved for quite a long time, since I doubt she picked up a ton more fans in KH3, considering she's not really there for much of it. I also figured it'd be easier to forget about her, given her limited appearances and the fact that, you know, people canonically forgot about her in the games. But she's like second credit in Chain of Memories and plays a big part in the KH2 prologue, both things I'm a big fan of, and I'm sure that appreciation is shared by a lot of you. It's kind of ironic that she's described as Kairi's shadow when she's pretty clearly overshadowed her if the votes are anything to go by. But it makes sense, we have like 1 1/3 video games that focus pretty heavily on Naminé, whereas Kairi has never really been the star unless, again, you count Melody of Memory, which isn't really countable. Naminé's got that tragedy angle too, which people are always going to gravitate toward. If you don't have some big trauma baggage in this series, you're going to suffer in the polls. Naminé was presumably born in Castle Oblivion, gets immediately captured, and is called an awful witch and used to manipulate someone who only ever falsely cared about her. Then she's finally freed by said someone, only to effectively get re-kidnapped by someone who, oh what rotten fucking luck, is nobody racist. He's gonna use her for all she's worth, and then hopefully, if his schedule allows it, have her killed afterwards. And then, for a good while, she lost her autonomy and had to live inside Kairi. On one hand, it would be cool to see Naminé continue to be involved in the story, but on the other, leave her the fuck alone and let her keep collecting seashells. She's been through enough. Outside of her misery arc, Naminé's just pretty cool. Like, her powers, despite being oddly specific and limited, are also fascinating and a really interesting byproduct of her unorthodox creation. I also like how Naminé has this sort of, not angel of death vibe, but like angel of bad news. She's this angelic figure who shows up on numerous occasions to have these really difficult conversations with so many other characters, whether it's Sora, Riku, Roxas, or Xion. If you're sat down across from Naminé, you've probably lost a pet or relative, and she's about to break the news to you. In 7th place, with 731 votes, I'm so proud of him for making it this far, it's Terra. I didn't spare a vote for Terra, but if I had a 6th, it would have gone to him for sure. Mainly as a protest vote, not against any other characters, but against the numbskulls out there who still say that Terra's, well, a numbskull. But I do think the fandom is really turning a corner on this guy. Even though it's been, and I'm sorry to say this, 5+ years since KH3, if this survey happened right after, or even a year or two after KH3, I really do think Terra would have struggled to make top 10. He's obviously not this high up because he's done anything super recently, because almost none of these characters have, but because fans are warming up to him after he was pretty relentlessly shit on for like 10 years. I probably can't fully justify my affinity for Terra. It's very much Marge Simpson, I just think he's neat potato hours, but that's fine. I'm sure a lot of you are like that for Scold or Ephemer. It might be fair to call him Riku Light, like yes, he does undergo a similar arc, but hey, people love the Riku arc, so clearly they like it on Terra too, just not as much. I think the key word to describe Terra is determined. Sometimes that determination leads him in the wrong direction, but it also leads him back to his friends, to bust out of the fucking Guardian and make good on that promise. God, I fucking love that scene. I also just love his design, the fashion sense, the hair, honestly all the characters from Birth by Sleep have designs I'm particularly fond of. I'm really curious to see how they use Terra moving forward. Like, I wonder if he's gonna have any angst or reflection regarding the, 10 years of half-alive servitude he was stuck in, or if he's just gonna go back to being like, alright, what did you expect? And honestly, I'd be happy with either. I think after Aqua was such a gigantic hero for Terra and Ven, it'd be nice to see them help her conquer any of the potential demons she may have lingering from her time in the Dark World. And if Terra and Aqua date, I'm not gonna be mad about it. I just really hope the Wayfinders aren't sidelined entirely, which I don't think they'll be given the scene in Remind with them putting on their armor and going through the Dark Corridor, but I hope it's not just off-screen stuff. I want to see more of this supposed friendship they kept going on and on about. Anyway, hashtag Terra's not stupid. He exists in a fictional work and thus would have no reason to perceive Xehanort as this obviously evil-looking guy. That's not how writing works. That's all one hashtag for the record. And we are now taking a massive leap, entering an entirely separate tier here. 916 votes separate 6th place and 7th, which almost seemed fake to me, but I triple-checked. In 6th place, with 1,647 votes, is Xion. And wow, I did not expect her to do this well, because while I know Xion has her fans, I feel like she's always been a super polarizing character. I remember people really not caring for her when she was introduced. When I announced this project, someone in a comment or in Twitch chat said that if I were to do a least favorite KH character survey, Xion would make the top 10 in both projects. I never really got the Xion distaste, to be honest. I guess it might have initially seemed like an ass pool to have this game that introduces a 14th member of Organization 13, but everyone forgets who she is afterwards, and that explains why no one ever talks about her in KH2. I say this as someone who really loves this series. Please hold my hand when I say this and understand that I am not making fun of you or hating the games. That sounds really fucking stupid. It is so conveniently fanfictionally stupid. Like, come on, can we at least reach some consensus on that? I say that as someone who really enjoys the Days storyline and finds Xion fun and charming and interesting and tragic. I'm just saying I get why her existence sorta pissed people off, though I personally never really had a problem with it. Because Days came out when I was in middle school, okay? I listened to the Org 13 theme on my iPod Nano while wistfully looking out the bus window. You could have put 20 more fucking characters in Days and I would have eaten it up. While the premise of a forgotten 14th member was very convenient and surely something I had read in a blog or GameFAQs post prior to 2009, I mean, it still had me hooked. I still wanted to know how and why nobody talked about Xion in KH2. It's because she died so fucking hard that it made everyone so sad they just couldn't ever bring it up. But no, while Xion was never at the absolute top of my list, I really respect the character and the writing around her because I can see how significantly she and her story resonates with people. Days is a story about self-discovery and identity, about characters who are trying to understand who they are at their core, and doing all of that in the face of a world and people who are dismissive and apathetic at best and cruel and hostile at worst. It's not just that Roxas is a nobody or Xion is a replica in the Kingdom Hearts context, it's that they're treated as other or lesser for the crime of existing. There are arguments over how intentionally the writers may have been trying to make parallels to how marginalized people are treated in the real world, but it doesn't really matter if they intended it or not, because when people played this game, it struck a chord and it meant something to them. And you can certainly take issue with how certain things are handled with Xion and the plot of Days, and that can be done without minimizing how deeply people have connected to this character. Again, even though Xion isn't one of my personal favorites, I still think her story is so beautiful and tragic, and like Naminé, now that she's finally gotten her happy ending, please just leave her alone and let her live her life, Nomura. Also, please stop saying Xion who it was funny 2 times maximum 15 years ago. It's time to think of literally anything else to say. Thanks so much. Okay, it's top 5, baby, and it was really close here. Crazy how Xion and Terra were separated by nearly 1,000 votes, and 6th and 5th place are separated by just 4. Not 4,000 or 400, just 4. In 5th place, with 1,651 votes, is Aqua, the most popular woman in the series. This one I don't find too surprising. I figured Aqua's ceiling would be 4th place, but her floor is no lower than 6th, so right in the middle makes a ton of sense here. I think at this point, Aqua is pretty much the 4th credit overall in the series. She was arguably the true main character of Birth by Sleep, and then she had all of 0.2, which, sure, while short, was like entirely about Aqua and delved into her psyche in ways that not even the numbered titles do with Sora. I like Aqua, even if I sometimes give her a hard time about being a cop in Birth by Sleep. Aqua is like the kind of person you think all adults are like when you're a kid, someone who always knows what to do and just has shit figured out. Of course, you get there yourself and realize nobody really has a fucking clue, but I think Aqua actually does. She is the definition of dependable, and very much in the running for a series-wide Best at Being a Good Friend award. Like, sure, she scolded Ven a little bit or didn't give Terra the benefit of the doubt, but she was working with limited information and is just trying to keep people safe. I think she's also the most fleshed out of the Wayfinder trio, even if it's a bit of a low bar. I come back to this basically anytime I talk about Aqua, but I really hope they revisit the moment where she froze up and saw the anti-Aqua tornado in Remind and expand on that. I would think Aqua was running on adrenaline for like the entirety of the KH3 endgame, but that was the one occasion where being in depression hell for 10 years caught up with her. Oh, by the way, only 5 of you voted for specifically anti-Aqua, which is like 495 votes less than I expected. Anyway, knowing that Kairi is off the train with Aqua after the end of Melmem gives me a lot of hope for both characters. Probably naively, but even if Aqua ends up getting benched and not doing much more, I still think she's had a hell of a journey, and she's more than deserving of the number 5 spot. In 4th place, another character I tossed a vote toward with 1,757. Dark Rescue is his middle name. It's Axel, or Lee, or whatever he wants to go by at this given moment. Look, it's a roller coaster being an Axel fan, or at least I know I'm on a roller coaster, maybe other people don't feel that way. For every Dark Rescue or perfect little script, there's an I'll always be there to bring you back or the brutal murder of your least favorite scientist. The way I see it, when Axel's good, he's phenomenal, and when he's bad, it's just kinda cringe at worst. But yeah, no, I'm still riding the high of Calm and Days Axel, and I'm willing to let the glory days be just that. It's not like he can really be running around killing folks or chomping people in the neck anymore. But I don't know, some more mischief, some more ulterior motives, that could be a fun little throwback. It really is amazing how quickly and dramatically Axel ascended the ranks of the Kingdom Hearts cast. Like, in terms of significance, he became what my middle school self would have written him to become, for better or worse. From the jump, back in Castle Oblivion, he was my favorite. I'm always a sucker for the sneaky bastard who's playing multiple sides, and that's Axel to a T, at least in that game. And then, one day when I was in school, ignoring whatever assignment I was supposed to be doing, I saw a screenshot of him with Kairi on Destiny Islands in KH2, and my brain fell out of my head. I remember being so excited that Axel was coming back, and I had literally nobody to talk to about it because no one in my life cared about Kingdom Hearts anymore. And don't get me started on him popping up in Birth by Sleep. If he wasn't already my favorite, that Lee scene just cemented it, because I think that's what established more of a personal connection for me with the character. I was just so enamored with his philosophy on living through others by being remembered. Like, we all want to leave something behind, and I don't know, it's not like the most novel or complex idea, but the candor and levity he expresses the idea with just really hit me. I could go on and on about Axel, and frankly the last 3 characters we have left, so I'm going to stop myself here because this video is already gargantuan. Also, fun fact, it originally wasn't supposed to be scripted, but I couldn't help myself. But in short, not at all surprised that Axel did this well. He's always been enormously popular, has some of the most dramatic and emotional scenes, and when he's not busy being a dorky uncle, he's pretty dang cool. Alright, we've arrived at the top 3, the Bronze Crown. Truth be told, I always knew exactly who would be in the top 3, it was just the order that was up for debate. Once again, a character I voted for with 2,327 votes is Riku. I've always stumped for Riku, maybe too much if you watch the character battle bracket video, but I think he's just simply the man. I think he's the MVP of the series. Sure, he was a little shit in KH1, but wow has he done nothing but come in clutch ever since. And he has more than made up for his sins by this point. Like, we forgive you, bro. It's okay. We're all getting uncomfortable from how bad you still feel about some shit that you did when you were 15. I'm kidding, of course. It's really good stuff. People get a bit hyperbolic about Riku's arc, like calling it the best in all of fiction, which I think is a bit much, but it's still very good, one of, if not the best in Kingdom Hearts. It's really amazing how much the first game was able to convey about Sora and Riku's friendship with the limited time they had on the island together. From the very beginning, this guy is just better than you, and even if you do manage to beat him in a sword fight or a foot race, he brushes it off like it doesn't bother him, which makes it all the more infuriating. Such humble beginnings and an innocent rivalry for a character that's been through the ringer ever since, like, the second he lands in Hollow Bastion. I don't think it's a super hot take to say that KH3 is the weakest of Riku's appearances, and I'm hoping it's just a cooldown before he gets back into the spotlight in this upcoming arc. Because now that he's finally shed the guilt and beaten the darkness allegations, what exactly does he do? Where does he go? They didn't really try to answer that in KH3, he was just there to play soldier and deliver some really sloppy exposition. Don't get me wrong, him standing up to the Demon Tide is one of my favorite moments from him, but outside of that, he's just sorta like waiting for something to do. At the same time, while I want to see a Riku 2.0, I don't really want it at the expense of someone like a Kairi or even the Wayfinder trio getting more development, because we have gotten a lot of Riku already. He has what I consider the superior campaign in Dream Drop, at least from a character perspective, and he also got Reverse Rebirth and Chain of Memories, so he's had plenty of time in the starring or co-starring role. God, I still remember how excited I was when I realized there was a whole second campaign for Riku after beating Marluxia as Sora. And that excitement was just amplified when I found out you can go into dark mode and do all the crazy shit he did in the Riku Ansem fight. Once again, coming back around to the caveman brain take, Riku's just cool, like he doesn't even have to try, it's just in his DNA. Sure, Sora has spawned some other characters, but Riku's got a bunch of wannabes whose names are Adjective Riku. Even the characters in the games want to be him. It's no surprise he scored this high, nearly 600 votes higher than the last guy. Okay, I know this is second place, but it really all comes down to this. Who's gonna win out? Well, let me say, it was ridiculous how close third and second were. Separated by 2 votes, and I checked this over and over to make sure it was right. With 2,329 votes is... Sora. I said this before, but had I closed the survey even a few minutes earlier or later, this could have gone one way or the other, so somehow Sora and Riku are practically tied. To be honest, if I were a betting man, I would have had Riku beating Sora, and not just by a little bit, but kinda considerably. I just figured most people would have preferred a little more angst and broodiness, but clearly they're getting their fix of that from someone else. I didn't toss one of my votes towards Sora, but I still really like him. I mean, I better, he's the playable character of my favorite video game. I think I've in the past been a bit too harsh on Sora, a bit too dull ordinary boy-pilled about him. He's not vanilla, and even if he was, I like vanilla. Vanilla shouldn't be synonymous with boring. It's a good flavor. Like, I'm sure there's hundreds of video game or anime protagonists out there who are more or less Sora, but just because it's a common template doesn't mean it isn't done well here. And I don't know what it is about his KH3 performance, but it's one of my favorite appearances for any character in any of the games. As much as I love KH1, Sora's pretty flat in that game. He's still fun, but he's almost like more of an avatar for the player than his own character. I feel like Chain of Memories is really where we get to know him more. I think his KH2 showing is just okay, and Dream Drop I'd rather forget about, but I feel like he's really been hitting his stride in KH3. Not overly enthusiastic, but still retaining some of that childlike wonder, a sense of humor, just a little bit of snark in certain situations, and most importantly, he's not a complete dumbass. I love the little quirks Sora has about him too, like his affinity for pirates or inability to operate technology. Or his hyper-competitiveness, or that thing where he puts his hands behind his head as like a relaxing pose. Also, I'm just generally a fan of how Sora isn't really your typical chosen one, just a guy who is in the right place at the right time and is good at making friends. Please don't let that get screwed up. Even if he wasn't on my ballot, Sora's still one of my favorite video game protagonists of all time, and him getting into Smash Bros is what I imagine it feels like for, like, your son to get into an Ivy League. He went off to war and fought Mega Man and Donkey Kong. He's out there representing us. He's like the face of unlikely video game crossovers, so I say to hell with anyone still salty about him being the last fighter. He's an icon, and he deserved it. And he deserved 2,300 of your votes. But in first place, to I'm sure very little surprise, and it was really close, it's Roxas. But also no, it wasn't close at all. He got 2,986 votes, a nearly 600 vote lead over Sora and Riku. It was an absolute blowout. Roxas also had a lot of people cheating for him, which, again, cringe and very easy for me to catch and remove. But even after getting rid of all the faulty votes, it still wasn't close. So you should've just had some confidence in your favorite character, you fucking goobers. I mean, think about that. Over half the people who voted in this used one of their 5 slots on Roxas. I constructed this form and said to myself, this is a lot of work just to reaffirm that Roxas is the most popular character right before I voted for Roxas, because how could I not? I was like 90% sure Roxas was going to be number 1, with room for Sora or Riku to potentially take it, but I did not expect this wide of a gap. Roxas is in a tier of his own. He's the breakout star from that middle era of the franchise, and his proper debut being in KH2 definitely helps considering it's still the most popular game in the series. Even all the people who checked out for the side games and came back in for Kingdom Hearts 3 know who Roxas is. Considering players are just dropped into Roxas's world at the beginning of KH2, I think it's a real testament to how well performed and written he is that so many people grow to like him. I could just be projecting my own feelings and experience here, but I think a lot of people start off feeling either apathetic or annoyed that they're stuck with Roxas for the first few hours of the game. And yes, it could potentially take you hours. Even I, someone who played Chain of Memories, felt really antsy and frustrated that I was with this new guy and his friends who I frankly could not have been paid to care about. But by the end of his last day in Twilight Town, I was like, no, get back in the egg, Sora. We have to save your brother. There's a racist bandage man and he's trying to kill your brother. I feel like it's sort of stating the obvious to really deep dive on why we like Roxas, but I guess here goes anyway. I mean, the base, most reductive take is that he's Sora, who we all like, but with a bit more edge, which we also tend to like. Beyond that, I think a lot of what I said about Xion can also apply to Roxas. There are these characters who were just thrust into turmoil from the very beginning of their lives, and at various points told that they shouldn't exist. They have to navigate this world that slaps them down before they even have a chance to take their foot off the starting line. But ultimately, it's just hard not to grow an attachment to the guy after watching his picturesque life crumble into madness around him. He won most of us over with "My summer vacation is over." It's just so fucking sad, and then you pile Days on top of it and there's another 800 votes right there. We're suckers for misery. And the emotional catharsis of his return in KH3 into beating the shit out of Sayek's combo, I mean, it's literally the payoff of a 10-year buildup. He's just so inherently rootable, and it helps that he's the first motherfucker to wield 2 Keyblades, like, again, add on another free 500 votes. We've been talking about future plans for a lot of these characters, so may as well think about the days to come for Roxas. To be honest, I have no clue. I don't really know how you keep him involved at this point, and like Xion and Naminé, I think he's already been through so much and had such a solid, consistent performance across the franchise, I would be fine if he's soft retired. Have him show up and say some lines, maybe even help out in a fight or two, but I don't know how much more story there is to tell with him. He's literally come back from the dead to kill his oppressor, like, where do you go from there? I won't complain if they find a place for him in this new era, but I won't be upset if everyone collectively agrees that he's earned his rest. He's the most popular Kingdom Hearts character, what more does he have to prove? Before I leave you today, I wanted to share some other characters who got a handful of votes, who I thought were best saved for the end of the video. This group of characters can be classified as the Unspelled. In Kingdom Hearts, when Xemnas inducts new members into the organization but fucks up the letters, he creates an Unspelled. They look human and feel emotions, but they're just not quite right. They say things like, "for all intensive purposes," and "it's a dog-eat-dog world." Introducing Amsen, Demax, Zezian, Ventass, Zulu, Alex, Luxlord, Colette, Rokas, Larxane, Larxan, and Luxine, Zenus and Zenmas, Aque, Agua, and Akuk, Kairi, Kari, Kiri, and Kiari, Xehanorth, Xenohort, and Xenoheart, and this guy is their leader, Rhodes. Thanks so much for watching and voting. This is probably my favorite video I've made this year. Hit like if you enjoyed, subscribe for more, regularpat.com for anything I'm up to, Twitch, Twitter, Patreon. Take it easy, stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time.